Good afternoon and welcome to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of January 28th, 2024. This meeting is being held in our hearing room. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. And we are resuming this afternoon with public hearing item number 7. And I will turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through the afternoon agenda.
Thank you, Sarah. Public hearing item number 7 is LPC 25-05231, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 543, Lot 15, 122 to 128 West 3rd Street in the South Village Historic District. This is an American round arch style stable building designed by Benjamin E. Lowe and built in 1889 with a 1900 extension on Minetta Lane designed by William Van Doren. The application is to construct rooftop additions, demolish the rear of the building to create a courtyard with new rear facades and connector, reconstruct lot line walls and floor slabs, alter the ground floors and install new infill and enlarge existing windows and create new window openings.
Just advance the first slide and then our client Patrick Milner is going to speak briefly. Good.
Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for your time. I'm Patrick Milner from the Chapman Group. We are a family-owned and operated parking and real estate company in Manhattan. We have owned the Minetta Garage at 122 West 3rd Street, 12 Minetta Lane, for the last 40 years. As the parking business has evolved, we have been looking at alternative uses for the property. Over the last 5 years, we have been exploring different uses for the property. During each iteration, we have engaged with the community to elicit their feedback and input. Today, we are bringing forth a project that we hope strikes a balance between preserving the historic character of the building while adapting it to a new residential use. We look forward to sharing our project with you. Our team is here today. The project team includes Morris Adjmi, Christopher Courtney, Christopher Chown from Morris Adjmi Architects, Cass Stachowbeck from Higgins Quaisbarth, and Nat Oppenheimer of Silman. I'm now going to have Morris come give an introduction. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Morris Adjmi Architect. I just wanted to say that we are excited to show this today. We've been working with Patrick for about 10 years on different ways to adaptively reuse this building. And Cass and Christopher from my office will take us through it, and I'll be around to help with the answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Morris. Cass Stackelberg, Higgins Quaisbarth and Partners. Good to see you all, and Happy New Year. I'm going to begin with a bit of a site introduction, a little bit of history and context before Christopher takes you through the design proposal. So the project site is 122 West 3rd Street. It's a through-block garage building with 100 feet of frontage on 3rd Street here on and 50 foot of frontage on Minetta Lane. The larger portion on 3rd Street was constructed in 1889 as a stable building. The building was then extended out to Minetta Lane in 1900, and then the entire structure was converted to a garage in 1921. It's located in the South Village Historic District, a relatively new district designated in 2013. The South Village District is surrounded by a number of other districts, and whereas these other districts have a relative uniformity of character, the store and loft buildings of Soho and NoHo, tenements in the Sullivan-Thompson Historic District, row houses in Greenwich Village, and even older row houses in the Charlton King Van Dam Historic District. The South Village District really is this wonderful mix of a wonderful mixed-use district with a rich and varied history. And just to read a small section from the designation report, the South Village Historic District represents an incredibly dense layering of history and architectural development, from the neighborhood's earliest history as a fashionable residential neighborhood to its subsequent transformation into a diverse mixed-use district. And obviously this mixed-use history is on display on the streetscape across the building fabric. Row houses, tenements, factory buildings, stables, garages, and warehouses. What's also interesting is that that variety and sort of mixed-use nature is apparent in the designation report itself. There are actually 9 separate authors which cover each of the separate chapters. There's a section on the historical and architectural development of the district, pre-19th century, 20th century, NYU and its impact on the village, but there's also quite a bit in the designation report about the social and cultural history of the South Village, Little Africa, the Italian South Village, the Bohemian culture, LGBT presence, and the presence of entertainment throughout the district. So it really, within this relatively small district, has a really fascinating, rich, and varied history. Some images of the existing buildings. The existing building, the 2 frontages on 3rd Street and Minetta, beginning first on the 3rd Street side, a relatively pedestrian, sort of simple brick-clad facade. The base is painted. Currently, there are 4 vehicular entries that serve the garage, and then the historic Minetta garage signage one can see directly above. The 3 leftmost openings are historic and will be retained, and the one to the west, to the right in the photograph has been enlarged over time and will be modified. On Minetta, sorry, the one other thing I'll just point out on 3rd Street is all the windows have been replaced with 1/1 aluminum windows. On the Minetta Lane side, the entire brick facade of the building has been parged with cementitious coating. The windows too have been replaced. Historically, they were multi-light. And you can see at the ground floor, there were 2 historic openings marked by these large lintels. Those have been infilled over time. So the back of the building has no presence on Minetta. There are no openings really that open onto Minetta Lane. I'll also just point out that both sides of the building have these prominent bulkheads, which really speak to the historic uses of the building. Our proposal, so 2 sort of aerial elevation views of the 2 sides of the building. So really consistent with a history of alterations, adaptations, and enlargements that one sees throughout the historic district. This project envisions an extensive amount of repair and restoration work across the street facades, as well as rooftop additions associated with this residential conversion. On the 3rd Street side, there will be 1 bay for entry for parking on the lower level, a building entry, and then commercial storefronts consistent with the character of that street. The upper portion, floors 2, 3, and 4, extensive repair work to the brick masonry, new multi-light windows matching the historic configurations, and then up on the roof, a 20-foot setback 2-story rooftop addition clad in brick and standing seam metal. And flipping around onto the Minetta side, the introduction of new openings on the 2nd and 3rd floor for new windows to allow for the residential use, reopening those openings at the ground floor, and a 1-story addition at the roof also set back 20 feet. I'll also just point out, and you'll see this later in the presentation, but the core of this development, this is a very deep development running through from one side of the block to the other. There's a single core. It's been centralized and pushed way back, so there's really minimal visibility, particularly close in, of those rooftop features. I'll also just point out that this is kind of an aerial view. One doesn't see anywhere near this kind of visibility. The experience on the street, I think, is really going to, within the district in particular, is really going to be two restored facades and an enlivened base, sort of at the pedestrian scale, where right now you have on the 3rd Street side just garage entries, and then on Minetta you have basically a blank facade. So the impact on the street will be significant. A bit about the history of the 2 sides of the building. As I mentioned, the 3rd Street building originally was built as a stable in 1889. These are the earliest photos we could find from the late 1930s, 1940. The photo on the right illustrates the 6th Avenue elevated, which actually ran right down 3rd Street directly in front of the building. This is a photograph as it was being demolished. And then the other 2 images, the tax photos, you can see that historically the base of the building, perhaps because of the presence of the elevated, was painted white, where the upper floors was left unpainted. So historically there was this sort of stratigraphy across that front facade. And you can also see the variation of openings across the ground floor, some large openings, some smaller openings, varying positions on the elevations, and also those historic light fixtures which remain today and will be preserved. On the Minetta side, these two maps on the left margin just illustrate the enlargement of the building. This photo, the map on the top from 1895, and the one on the bottom from 1904, showing the extension of the stable out to Minetta Lane, and then the eventual conversion to a garage in the 1920s. These photos illustrate that period when the building had become used as a garage. And a bit of context, so an aerial view of the neighborhood with an overlay of the district map of the 1920s, and then just highlighting in yellow, this is the 6th Avenue elevator. So it came down 6th, turned 90 degrees on the 3rd Street, and then turned 90 degrees down West Broadway. This was the city's first elevated train. It was built in the late 1870s, early 1880s, and its presence really had an effect on the district. These yellow marks highlight the sort of industrial buildings in the district, the stables, garages, and warehouses. And then, of course, our building is highlighted in red. So you see the sort of proliferation of those buildings, but a concentration of them, particularly along 3rd Street. So the presence of the elevated in coming into the district had an impact, as well it had an impact when it was taken down. Some photos soon after the construction of the elevated looking east and west on 3rd Street. You have a sense, as the designation report noted, this sort of fashionable residential district being impacted by the presence of this iron structure running right down the middle of 3rd Street, and sort of what that did to the district. Within the district, there's quite a number of industrial buildings. As I mentioned, there's a real mix. The designation report notes this, of course. Industrial buildings, including numerous stable buildings, 2 right around the corner on McDougal Street, on 115 and 117, another on Thompson Street, as well. Factory buildings, 18 Minetta Lane, which is just 2 buildings to the west of the project site on Minetta. That was built as a tin can factory. 125 West 3rd Street, directly across the street on 3rd Street from that side of the building, and then another on Thompson Street. Just as the introduction of the elevated had an impact on the district, the removal and demolition of the elevated in the late 1930s had a pretty significant impact on the district as well. And the designation report actually notes this, saying that it led to a wave of renovations and rehabilitations. And what's interesting is sort of when you look at the effect of that sort of in the first quarter of the 20th century, there's this movement away from some of the industrial uses and the sort of beginning of this mixed use nature of the district, and the conversion particularly of a number of these buildings to residential use. So this is just one example on McDougal Street. So the stable building, which actually was originally built as a 3-story building, by 1870, that top mansard floor had actually been added, and then alterations over time leading to the residential conversion of that building in the 1920s. Similarly, on Thompson Street, the renovation and rehabilitation of this building leading to a residential conversion in the 1970s, and the enlargement of the building by 2 stories. And then just one other example, this is that tin can factory on Minetta Lane in the 1980s, being redone and expanded by a full floor. So this illustrates sort of how buildings in the district were adapted, and also adapted for a range of uses, including residential, entertainment, and other uses. And of course, that wasn't limited to industrial buildings, historically industrial buildings, but residential buildings in the district as well. So this long row of row houses on Bleecker Street from the 1860s, in the 1920s, a long line of studio windows constructed at the roof line, right at the street wall, running across the top of the building. So this district in particular, perhaps owing to its mixed use nature, but also I think to its cultural history, has this really interesting evolution of modifications and enlargements. So in the topic of sort of transformations and moving from industrial uses to residential uses, we wanted to just share a few commission approvals from the last 5 years, particularly for large-scale garage buildings, because I think obviously there's a movement within the city to sort of move away from private vehicle use, And so our office has worked on a number of these projects. This is a project you all saw 5 years ago down in Tribeca, a two-story rooftop addition with somewhat limited visibility from the side. But again, the idea that these buildings do lend themselves to adaptive use. This was originally planned as a commercial use. Now it's being thought of as a residential use. But these buildings, as I said, given their scale, often can take a larger scale addition, but also lend themselves to these new uses. A project from a couple of years ago on West 11th Street. This is obviously a smaller building than the buildings at Minetta and West 3rd Street. A tall one-story addition with a visible bulkhead that the commissioners approved back in 2022. And then one other one on Greenwich and Perry Street. This is on the left side of you looking up Greenwich Street, just showing the visibility of the addition as it's experienced from the street. And I think what's interesting in the approval for this project, the commissioners considered this visibility "quote unquote" moderate, and that it didn't overwhelm the building and streetscape. And I think you'll see as we get to the visibility studies for our project, we are within the range of this level of visibility, perhaps maybe a little bit less. So finally, getting to our project site, just a little bit more about the existing building. So on 3rd Street, I shared this overall view. As I mentioned, the windows, historically, they were a 6/6 multi-light, but those have been changed out. And then at the ground floor, the base has been painted. The brick is in fair condition. These 3 openings on the left side, those will be retained. At the center bay, that looks like a blank brick wall. Historically, there were openings in that section, which I think you can see perhaps telegraphing through. Here, they're brick arches, 2 brick arches in that bay. And then the bay to the right, which has been combined and is much larger, that would be modified. But as part of the overall scope, the Minetta Lane garage signage is going to be preserved and reinstalled. The cast iron sconces and globes, those will be restored off-site and brought back. And then an extensive amount of repair and restoration work across the upper portion of the facade. As you can see, the brick is in fair condition. It's been pointed. Windows replaced. Across the top, there's a simple corbelled brick parapet, which has been covered in sheet metal for about 80% of it. That will be removed, and the brick will be restored, and that bulkhead, of course, will be retained. And then finally, before Christopher begins, just a streetscape view, just to give you a sense of the variation along West 3rd Street. The district boundary stops here, 6th Avenue is at this end, Google is at that end, and looking sort of left to right. So you have an interesting new law 7-story tenement building, unusual at 7 stories. Then 2 old law tenements from the 1880s, our building at the center, and then this very tall 5-story building constructed as a repair shop for the fire department in the 1880s as a bookend to the garage building at 122. Christopher.
Cast. Good afternoon, Christopher Courtney with Morris Adjmi Architects. A couple slides to start, just to give some orientation of the building. The slide on the left is obviously the existing building. That red dashed line there is shown to show a courtyard, which will be cored out of the building to provide light and air and give some residential dimensioned spaces to the front and the back of the building. And then on the right side, you can see the proposed design at the front of West 3rd there. You can see the 20-foot setback for the 2-story addition. Stepping up from that, you can see what is the elevator and stair bulkhead, as well as mechanical screens. We've worked pretty hard to get those as central and tight and as efficient, centered in the middle of the building to help with visibility throughout the district. There is, as Cass mentioned, one core for the building, so there's only one elevator and stair bulkhead, and those both exist on this this portion of the facade. And then flipping around to Minetta Lane, again with those red dashed lines to show the courtyard. And then here you can see on the Minetta facade that there's only a 1-story building. You can also see on the back side, you can see the face of the courtyard and the architectural facade condition there. Stepping up from that again, you can see the elevator core, that tall square in the middle. And because there's that elevator core only on one side of the building, there is a bridge element that we've included to connect the two portions of the building. So if you live on an upper floor, you get off of the elevator on one side of the building and walk to the other side. So there is a bridge element that connects the two portions of the building. The next slide is basically the same AXO, but we've added some materials to here so we can kind of understand why we've addressed things in a certain architectural vocabulary with materials. So starting on the drawing on the left side, the white face there at West 3rd is to indicate the existing historic facade. That's to remain. All of the red will be new brick. So that brick will wrap from the front of the building through the lot lines into the courtyard and wrap around. And then at the top of the building, we are expressing a sort of singular story treatment as the addition. That's meant to be a zinc colored aluminum. It'll be a standing seam material. And that's been chosen to sort of lighten visually the addition at the top of the building, as well as I think it's mostly just for the lightened visualness of it. Here you can also see the bridge that sort of connects between, that's mostly glass. We'll see another image of that as we move forward. This slide is to just orient the plan. On the top right, the proposed plan, you can see the lobby, which is the residential entry to the building. To the right of that is a parking entry. So the parking will go down to the cellar. There'll be 8 spaces in the cellar that will just be used for residential tenants, so not public parking. And then the small residential quadrant to the northwest quadrant, retail. So there's about 2,000 plus square foot of retail. Here you can also see the elevator and stair core sort of set towards the northern part of the building. That's the portion that runs up through to the top of the building. And then at the bottom of the plan, you can see the Minetta Lane portion of the building. There's two residential units there that's bisected by an egress corridor that comes out and has an egress door onto Minetta Lane. On the top left, the existing building, you can sort of see more clearly the existing openings. Those are for the vehicular. 3 of those 4 will be maintained to the exact dimensions, and we can see that a little further in the next slide. So the existing conditions as they are on the left side and the proposed design on the right side. Starting with the storefront on the existing building, the changes that we are proposing is that the door on the left will be removed. In the center of there, where there's the dashed line, that will be, as Cass mentioned, there was previously some openings there that will be also reopened, but in a square format. And the opening on the right side will be reduced back to more its original size. The tops of all of these openings currently have a row lock, a soldier course row lock. Those will be maintained, as you can see on the right side, above all of those openings. There's a heavy frame there now that's a metal frame that'll be removed, so the brick just wraps the corner. And then the storefronts themselves are intended to be a contemporary infill storefront. They're not meant to pull any traditional details into them, since they were existing vehicular and stable openings. So that's meant to sort of be a maintained condition. And then as we move up the height of the building, we can see the windows in the base of the building are to be replaced with those 6/6 lights. The garage, the Minetta garage signage will be maintained. And then moving up to the addition, the first floor of the addition is in brick, as we looked at with that axonometric. The punches and the fenestration there are also multi-light fenestration, since they are sitting in brick, and that's meant to sort of be a bit of a transition floor up to that the upper floor. And then the upper floor and all of these sort of standing seam conditions are meant to echo on the artist studio conditions. I've been asked to speak up a bit. The upper floor is a standing seam. The vocabulary there is meant to echo the artist studio conditions in some of the previous precedents that we saw. And we'll move on. Here we've just got the streetscape again, so we can again see the height and the width of the existing base of the building. Again, the addition there is set back 20 feet, but we can see the relationship of that addition at 83 feet and how it sits in between sort of two of the taller buildings to the right at 71 and to the left at 76 feet. And here we've got finishes for the building. We do have some finishes here in the front. So starting with the base of the building, the existing brick will be cleaned and restored. All of the infill fenestration, so the windows, the storefront, the doors, those will be a bronze color. That's sort of what's being passed around. The rooftop addition will be this brick here that we're passing around, which complements the existing brick below. And the rooftop addition will be a zinc colored aluminum, as we mentioned previously. Here we're zooming in a little bit on the storefront itself. The idea here is to kind of show the character of those storefronts. Again, just to echo the openings and the contemporary info here that echoes the vehicular openings that were there previously. And then we've got obviously different uses for these with the egress door on the right, the 3 retails moving to the left of that, and then the residential entry and the parking entry on the left. Again, the signage and the sconces will all be refurbished and replaced. Here, just give a little more detail on some of those storefront openings. Mostly the 3 on the right, we're looking at different module possibilities for the retail, just to give some flexibility for retail tenants that would use the space. So whether it's a single door, no doors, or double doors. Here you can also see in those plan details the depth at which the storefronts are set back. So we're about 1 foot 10 set back from the street. So we're sort of maintaining an echo of that those large openings that did not have doors, or some did and some didn't. So that's sort of a little echo there. We do have a 10-inch base at the storefronts, and we do have a louver at the top of the openings, and that's for the retail itself to have mechanical use accommodated for there. On the bottom row, detail D is a large-scale detail of the canopy that sits above the residential entry. The idea for the profile there is to be something that's somewhat contemporary, but also draws a little bit from some of the traditional detailing. So for instance, the existing globes that'll be replaced there on the right. All right, here we have a detail of the windows at the base of the building. We are proposing an enlargement of these windows by 6 inches from the base down. The top will remain intact. The brick lintel there will remain intact. And this is mostly just to get a little bit more light into the residential units. Here we have a section detail through the addition at the top of the building. The first floor of this is brick, and then we have a Rolock brick sort of soldier course that serves as a bit of a transition and connection to the floor above, which is the standing seam. The standing seam is angled back in all of the conditions, not just on the facade. So any condition that we have the standing seam, it's angled back, and there's some dimensions there. There's a 10-inch setback. The frame of those openings is 8 inches.
So just continuing on to the Minetta Lane side, I'm just going to share a few existing photographs and to talk about the existing conditions back there. So an overview of the building on the right side of the slide and some other details. The upper portion, as I mentioned, of the facade has been parged. It's not just painted, but it's been coated with a cementitious coating. Some of that has washed off or worn off where there's been water along the upper left corner. But you can see the facade itself has a bit of articulation. It's for corbelled parapet. The windows, as I mentioned, historically were 6/6, but were changed out with calamine windows at some time. And then across the base of the building, those large lintels which mark the historic entries at the ground floor. And then at the far left here, this entry was inserted sometime later. We're not exactly sure when that was cut into the base of the ground floor. Some detailed photos of the upper portion of the facade. Just to illustrate the corbelling across the top, there are some cracks that are being addressed through this program, this overall project, as well as some detailing of the windows, calamine windows and lintels. And then finally, before Christopher takes you through the design on Minetta, just a sense of the streetscape along Minetta. Again, this sort of mixed use nature of the district, there's sort of a little microcosm of that right here on the district, sort of reading left to right. So where the trees are, that's just outside the historic district, that first building, that 5-story tenement building from the 1880s, and then the converted tin can factory, which is now a theater, the row house, which was expanded prior to designation at 16 Minetta, then our property at 12 to 14, and then 115 McDougal, which I mentioned earlier, a historic stable building that has been converted, that incidentally was the location of Bob Dylan's first performance in New York City at 115 McDougal. So I think it sort of encompasses the full span of experiences, industrial uses, residential, factory use, stable use, all within this streetscape. Christopher?
All right, with two street-facing facades, there's a lot to run through, so thanks for bearing with us. Again, the left side here is the existing building, the right side is the proposed. Starting with the storefront at the left side of the building, the small door there on the left will be removed. There's those 2 existing lintels, so the dash lines between those lintels will be opened up, and also an opening in the center for that egress door. So you can see those openings on the right side. The 2 large openings below the lintels and the new opening for the egress door. And then as we move up the building, obviously we can see those dash lines on either side of the existing window openings, and those are added to give more residential units, more light and air. In each of those openings, there are 2 distinct windows within the opening. That was how it was historically, and that's to be maintained. And then, of course, the 1-story addition at the top of the building. And then here we see the new design in that same streetscape with a varied condition throughout the streetscape. Now with the introduction of some of the openings that we just looked at the last slide. And then some more finishes here. So the existing building does have a gray coating on it, so that's to be maintained. That's that light color at the bottom of the circles there. That coating does allow the brick to read through, so you still read the texture of the brick on the building. That's the existing condition. That's what we're proposing to remain. The infills of the fenestration will be a gray, medium gray color aluminum for all of the windows and the doors. There is an existing brick lintel above the windows. That's proposed to be painted to match the existing lintels at the storefront, so there's just a bit of continuity between below and above. as well as finishes. And then at the top of the building is the standing seam, zinc colored aluminum for the addition. And so here we have a sense of the street view and the experience of the street in a way. We see the building in context. We see the stable house on the right, the row house on the left. And we see what used to have a lot of otherwise blanked off openings, a few more openings being added. We hope that this will give a little more life to the street and definitely a new experience to the street. And then also there's two trees in front of the building. Those are existing street trees. Those are to remain. On the left, three images, we're looking at all of these images. We're looking at some historic, stable openings. The image on the right is of 12 Minetta Lane. Here on the right side, we can see two large openings, two large doors with glass above and inset panels below, with I think a 8/8 light. So we're drawing from that that condition that existed historically for the new openings. Obviously, for the new openings, there will be some more glass to maintain a residential use. So you can see that echoed here on the top left in the elevation. In this case, we have three sort of vertical sets of panels for each of the large openings. And in this case, we've got a 9/9. There's still a panel being maintained at the base of these openings to sort of echo some of that historic condition. And then in the plan, you can see that enlarged plan there, you can see on either side flanking those openings are actual entries into the residential units. And so those are sort of built into that, glass facade there. And in the center, you can see the door to the sort of secondary and egress door, and that's sort of set back a little bit from those residential glass pieces. And then it's kind of hard to see. There's a dashed line there for shutters. And those are just intended to have some shutters on the inside of the glass for privacy for the residential tenants to use as they choose, of course. Detail D at the bottom is of the canopy here at this entrance. So this canopy, as you can see in the elevation, is curved to mimic the segmental arch of the windows above. And then as far as the profile is a little more simple and is meant to echo the existing lintels of the image you can see on the right. Here we're looking at some details for the existing openings and the new openings that are being added for the windows on floors 2 through 4. The image on the top right shows the historic condition of some windows there. And as you can see, within a single opening, there are two expressed windows. Those windows do have a bit of a deep mullion, so we're sort of recreating that. And looking at some of the spacing between those to give a little bit of that feel of two distinct windows. In this case, we're matching the 6/6 condition of the lights. And in the section on the bottom right, you can see the double sash condition. The top sash will be fixed. The bottom sash will be a operable hopper window. And here we're looking at the sort of courtyard and rear facade conditions. They are masonry walls. They're largely unarticulated without many significant architectural features, if none at all. The masonry in the back is all coated and parged. These walls are scheduled to be removed. And then looking at the courtyard design itself, the organization of the materials and the vocabulary here is similar to the front of West 3rd. So you've got a brick at the base of the building, and you've got the standing seam single-story condition at the top. In this case, we're looking starting from the bottom at floors 2 through 5. So 2, 3, and 4 match what's at the front of the building, and then 4 and 5, the brick and the standing seam, are actually the addition. So there's 2 stories of addition in this elevation. And then this is facing, flipping around the opposite side, looking on the back side of the Minetta Lane facade. And same idea here. In this case, there's only one-story addition, so the 3 brick floors here are sort of existing floors. And the same idea here we're using for the windows and the punches. So there's a large punch, but we're sort of articulating several windows within a singular punch to sort of break down the scale and mimic a little bit of what's going on in Minetta Lane. And also using multi-light windows in these openings to mimic both Minetta Lane and West 3rd base buildings. Here we're looking straight on at that bridge that connects the 2 faces of the building. The material here is intentionally light because this is a portion of the building that you can see a little bit from 6th Avenue. It's mostly glass. It's framed in aluminum. And there are some like little fins in between, and that's mostly just to give a little shadow and shade inside of those so they don't become complete heat boxes. But generally speaking, to try to keep the language and the vocabulary visually light. The next 2 slides are to cover a little bit of the structural work that will be going on. We are working with Silman on the structure for this building. The present structure is currently safe for use as a garage, but for future use and occupancy, some reconditioning is required. The plans on the top left talk about the interior floor and roof structure and column layout that are to be removed and rebuilt to accommodate the new residential use. One thing to note, the cellar, so on the top left is the cellar. The cellar lot line walls are to remain. There is no underpinning required for this project. After doing some probes, we did confirm that the lot lines are independent walls. They're not party walls. This is the case for all. There are 4 buildings that adjacently touch this directly, so that's the case for all of those. The next plan, the 1st through 4th floors, you can see where those dashed lines are basically indicating removal of lot line walls. Part of this is already due to the courtyard being accommodated for, so walls coming out for that. And the street facades are to be maintained, of course, and this will require and is intended to have a robust scaffolding and shoring portion for that. The detail there, plan detail B, is at a typical corner condition. So the dark hatch is showing the existing street wall being maintained with a 3-way brick. Returning back from that is the independent neighboring building, so not a party wall. And then the lighter hatch is the new brick facade that will be replaced as the lot line wall. And then the section on the bottom is to show in the middle, you can see where the courtyard is sort of being removed. And then some of the floor heights are being adjusted just to accommodate and sort of equalize as we go through the building. This slide is a lot line wall diagram. So if you look at the center of one of these, you can sort of see the cutout for the courtyard. The medium gray hatch is the new brick facade and lot line wall that will be reconstructed. And then sitting above that is the addition with the standing seam, also at the lot line facade. And then the darker hatch at either end of each of those elevations shows the existing street wall to be maintained as well as the bulkheads. And then last slide for me, a section just showing existing and new conditions above and below. 2 things to point out. I think the courtyard cutout on the section below you can kind of see, and then you understand the scale of the front and the back of the buildings, both with the additions as well as just the depth of those buildings. And then also just the floor-to-floor heights. So trying to maintain an existing general existing condition of the floor heights, and then maintaining that same floor height as we go into the additions of the building.
Great. So just to now just share with you our visibility studies. So what follows is a sort of a walk around the building, beginning directly across the street and then going roughly in a counterclockwise west-south east and then north. So from directly across the street, there is just a little bit of the top floor of the addition that is visible. You can see that in that light gray tone. Christopher passed around the material samples previously, so that's the standing seam metal tone. I'll also just point out, just so you understand, if you see this in the photograph, so the mock-up was constructed, there's pipe scaffolding, and then the yellow is actually the habitable space, and that's highlighted in these photographs, and the orange is actually mechanical space. So you'll see even in this photograph, the yellow habitable space actually obscures views of any of the rooftop mechanical features and bulkheads. So just a little bit of visibility from directly across the street. And then we'll begin to move west. So 6th Avenue is this interesting condition. As you probably all remember from previous applications, the sort of east side of 6th Avenue was raised as part of the widening of the street and the subway construction. So this is looking across the subway entry, the playground, and then the building sort of here in this photograph. So you do have visibility of that top floor. This is sort of this moment on the street. Obviously, all these pictures were taken this winter, just last month. So you can see the pretty healthy trees obscured even just by these branches. And we think these will likely be seasonal views in the spring and summer. These would be obscured by leaves on these trees. Now coming across 6th Avenue, sort of a similar angle with a little bit of visibility just through this slot. Here you're seeing at the top floor and a small portion of the floor directly below. But again, this is sort of this moment where the two buildings on either side of 3rd Street allow for this view through the slot. As you move down 6th Avenue, there's an opening over this playground where you're seeing between the two sides of the block, the Minetta side and the 3rd Street side. So here you can see the back of the Minetta side of the construction. In these views, you're also picking up accretions on the rooftops of other buildings, the bulkhead on this building on Minetta, quite a bit of construction on the top of that 5-story industrial building that's directly adjacent on 3rd Street. Now a sort of a more straight on view looking due east across 6th Avenue. And again, you're just seeing that top portion of the bridge and a little bit of the addition on Minetta, but that's that bridge that Christopher was describing. It's glazed with a gray metal, and the whole tone of this side of the block, really the sort of stucco clad elevations of the 5-story building, industrial building on the 3rd Street side and the 5-story tenement building on the Minetta side that sort of all blend with that palette. A little bit further to the south, now looking east, northeast, you're seeing the top portion of the addition over the adjacent building. And again, the distinctions between yellow and orange, you're seeing a little bit of habitable space and then a bit of the core off the back of the roof. There's a long view looking up Carmine Street, and we wanted to include this. Again, you can see the sort of density of the tree branches, but the addition is seen in that context. So right here, you see these trees. You're not seeing the historic buildings. You're barely even seeing the historic district, but you do see the top floor of the addition. And then as we come around on Minetta, when you're in close to the building and experiencing that intersection between Minetta Lane and Minetta Street, you do not see the addition on this side of the building. You're just sort of experiencing the modifications and restored facade. And then as you move south on Minetta Street, there's an angle in the street where it turns back towards 6th Avenue, and there is visibility of the addition, again, sort of through the trees there. And then as you take 5 steps back towards 6th Avenue, that visibility is obscured by the angle of the street. Coming around, now we're on the corner of Minetta Lane and McDougal. This is 115 McDougal. This is that stable building directly adjacent to us. So I mentioned that before. You can see the addition here. I think it is sort of worth noting that the building that I pointed out earlier, 117 McDougal with its mansard roof, you can see that sort of in the same context as the sloped addition on the Minetta Lane side of the project. And then coming around north on McDougal, this is now north of 3rd Street. You're seeing the upper portion of that top floor. You almost don't see the historic building, but you do see the addition sort of in this moment on the street. And then a little bit closer in on 3rd Street now, closer to McDougal, just a little portion of the addition sort of offset beyond the historic facade. And then just finally landing back here with these two views. So I think in terms of, appropriateness, a few things to think about, sort of overall the historic district context. As I mentioned, this is the South Village is a district that is really characterized by this sort of mixed use nature, but also interestingly, how those historic buildings, particularly those that were more of industrial uses beginning in the first quarter of the 20th century, saw this history of adaptations and enlargements. The garage type, obviously, this building was originally developed as a stable and then converted 100 years ago to a garage use. I think it's typical of the district. There are other buildings of this type. And I think thinking about the adaptation of garage buildings, obviously the commissioners have supported the conversion of garage buildings and the enlargement of garage buildings for residential use. And then finally, just on the overall design approach for the project, I think it fits very neatly within this mixed-use context of the district, and we hope you agree that we think this is a good balance between the introduction of the residential components and what's needed to bring in residential use, balanced with the preservation of the building and its industrial character. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions on this one? Yes, Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand, the existing structure is, what? What is the structural system of the existing building? Concrete?
No, the existing structure is steel and brick.
Oh, it is steel.
Mhm.
Okay, so essentially, what is left of the existing, the facade?
The facade.
And
And the stuff.
being moved, 'cause I noticed the
Correct.
sections adjusted their heights.
That's
So the
right.
front and the rear are retained, rear being revised and front being revised at the ground floor.
That's correct.
Essentially the,
Mhm.
okay, thank you.
Any,
Also, just to point out, having been in the building, what's interesting, we don't have photographs of this, but as a stable building and then a car garage, there have been significant changes on the interior to the structure. When you see it, it's quite something. Nat's, just to note that Nat Oppenheimer is joining us by Zoom. So if there are other
Okay.
things that he wants to add, Nat, you should jump in here,
Yeah,
but
sure. if Matt has
I'm
anything to
happy
add,
to
but
have
I think
all of
that
us.
helps because as it has been, it's an adaptive reuse over and over. I would assume when it became a garage, it probably had some work done to it structurally.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
That's a fact.
Thanks, Matt.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
As I read it, the two additional floors have an 11-foot-8 clear floor to floor, which is similar to what you have in the existing. Is there a reason you couldn't go down to like 10-foot clear floor to floor to reduce the height of the addition?
In short, there's not a reason why we can't go down. I think it's just an interest to provide as much height as we can. We did actually initially have a few more feet that we already sort of took out. But yeah, in short, there's no code or otherwise reason, no.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Jefferson?
I have a similar question. On page 57, the addition to the roof is almost 44 feet, right? You're adding 2 floors plus mechanical stuff, so it's about 40-something feet you're adding to the building, existing building. Is that what I'm seeing? I think.
You're adding it up.
Yeah, I don't have an exact number for the total height of the new addition, but it will be about 25,
So it's almost
20,
the same,
25
you're
feet.
adding as much as existing.
No, that's a good question. The existing base is,
But pretty close.
yeah, if correct, if we consider the mechanical and this very small square footage of
Right, but
the
it's
elevator
a
shaft.
total height, really.
Sure,
Architectural.
sure.
And the second thing is the courtyards. The courtyards, I was trying to figure out, they're not 30 feet cuts. They're what, 28 or?
So previous code required 30 feet. With City of Yes, it's 20 feet. What's shown here is still 30 feet.
So it's about 20 feet.
So it's a 20-foot, it's a 30-foot offset from facades currently.
So you're adding X and you're cutting out X. Okay. thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Chu?
So the interventions to the existing masonry brick walls on both streets are getting revised openings. You had talked about wanting depth to set the storefronts back, which I think is good. Just the question is, what is your jam? Because is that a full 3 white original brick masonry wall? Are you exposing some other jam condition? Are you leaving what's that existing fabric to see as a jam and then putting the window system in the opening?
Yeah, if we're able to go back to that slide, it's not important, but in the enlarged details we have, the jam is deeper. You will see the brick existing 3 white, and then just on the sides only will be like a trim, an aluminum trim that goes all the way around. That's sort of set back. So you'll have the 8 inches of brick, and then you'll have about a foot of aluminum trim. And then you'll have the storefront itself.
So that
if that makes sense.
transition.
That jam condition is a metal frame that basically covers any new jam depth that would be,
Okay.
sheetrock or support otherwise.
And my only other, the other question related to the masonry is, can you go to an elevation where you show the new openings? You could look at the Minetta side that, I guess that has the new windows on the sides.
Can we?
Yeah, if we go to slide 45, I think that's what
One that has dimensions.
let's
I think
go.
you did a single floor.
Yeah,
elevation.
sure. Let's go forward one slide.
You
I believe.
can take control of the slides.
Awesome. Thank you. There we go.
The upper floor, sorry. Yes, there. So I want to understand your intent because we've seen applications and we've also seen conditions where things are designed and for some reason on site it wasn't built to the drawings, and that was a problem. Here, you've got existing masonry. I don't know what that brick is, but I assume it's usually brick walls are on a 4-inch module. So to me, the drawing intent should be to stay on the brick module and not to chop historic brick at strange slices. So I would just say that in terms of this elevation, the note should reflect that. More about masonry opening than exact, because none of those dimensions are brick modules, and that gets me worried.
That's a really good point. That would fully be our intent
Yeah,
is to
I
follow
just
that,
want-
and that
should
might not be
revised
reflected
because
here.
a-
Sure,
A
sure,
bad
absolutely.
builder will look at this and just cut,
Yeah,
right? And it's-
absolutely.
That's not what your intent was.
Definitely not the
Right.
intent. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, forgive me if this was addressed earlier, but did someone talk about the party walls? And 'cause I noticed you were rebuilding the party walls.
We're rebuilding the lot line walls. They're not party
Sorry.
walls. They're independent walls.
Why?
Why? Nat, if
I
you're on
can-
the line.
Yeah, I
you-
can answer that. No, I can answer that briefly. We did do probes to confirm that the walls are completely independent. In fact, there's a bit of a gap between the neighboring wall and our wall. And really the interest is in making sure that the building is fully code compliant at the end of the day. It's a safer condition, we feel in this case, to take those sidewalls down and build a new structure inside than to leave the remnant wall sort of floating between the neighbor and our new structure, and pin it to the new structure. So, we've saved many of these walls and would do so if it was more integrally connected to the neighbors and would be a risk. In this case, we feel it's more of a risk, frankly, to leave the tall, unreinforced masonry wall sort of floating between the neighbor and our new structure. I mean, we'd pin it, obviously, it wouldn't be floating, but in that sense. So we feel the condition here warrants removal.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, we're going to move to public testimony and we'll come back to you. So we have 2 people in person who've signed up, and please forgive me if I don't read the handwriting correctly. Perry Dulac.
Hi, everyone. My name is Patty Dulac, and I live in Minnetonka from 1985. I have French restaurant for many years. I raised my two sons there. And then at the moment, I live in Minnetonka Lane. I own the building with the restaurant, and my son, they live in Minnetonka Street. And I'm president of Block Association. I love this neighborhood. I think I'm 78. I think I will die in this neighborhood. But what I see, I really like the project. But I don't like what they do in the side of Minnetonka Lane. I like what they do in the side of West Third, because they keep the brick, they keep the sign of theater, and that West Third is a big mess. They're going to be beautiful addition. But Minnetonka Lane is very narrow, uneven street. And then from Minnetonka Street, go to Minnetonka Lane. Is in that Minnetonka Lane, we have two busy restaurants, Minnetonka Lane and the Toscano. And then we have a theater. And then a lot of us live there. And from McDougal, last couple of years, 20, 30 years, is much more crowded. Everybody turn in that street. I believe that to open that big entrance is a problem for us. And in Minnetonka Lane. And also, it is the brick. And then why they want to paint it gray? All that building in front the brick, in the middle they keep the brick. Why Minnetonka Lane is most historic street? They want to paint it, and they want to add 2 more floor, a lot of more window. Those add 2 more floor. The 3 home in front of them much shorter. They're going block the light, and I really think they have to adjust the Minnetonka Lane to according to landmark. They show a lot of building built, okay, before landmark. Now is landmark. We want to be protected on Minnetonka Lane. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Chris Dulac.
I live on 20 feet or 30 feet away from where those structures may be. I think in general, the neighborhood is supportive of redevelopment efforts as long as it's thoughtful. It just feels like with this design, it's kind of like pick and choose, a little disjointed. I mean, we've seen that type scaffolding with the visibility for the past year. I mean, you see rooftop everywhere. You're on 30 McDougal, you will see it. You're on Minetta Street, it's like the biggest thing you'll see. And the fact that the 2-story addition on Third, it's a 1-story addition on Minetta, but then you have the bulkhead. So you have all on Minetta Street, all townhouses that are actually townhouses, not a glass door, a giant glass door. And cornices, all you will see is this bulkhead and this rooftop in a different material than everything else. Right now, the building's kind of gel with everything, it's just brick. But I think they want to do sheet metal on top. It's going to be such an eyesore. It will ruin the skyline because you will see it from everywhere. So I think it's the scale of this is kind of concerning, but also it's just the inconsistency in the design. Like if it's honoring it as a stable house, it should feel and look like a stable house. Twin and Downing has a full stable door, which they would. This, I don't know what this is because there's nothing like it in the neighborhood. So I think it just feels like a new building. It doesn't really feel like either honoring the stable completely or a residential adapt redo, sure, but it's like kind of a picture of we want townhouses, we want big openings that have never been there really before. And it typically, I don't know where, like the center entrance on Minetta has never been there. So it really asks for 3 entrances, but there's only 1 entrance to every building in that area. And that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this item? John Graham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society supports several parts of this proposal. These include removing a section of the structure to fashion an inner courtyard and the proposed alterations to the Minetta Lane facade. However, the project falls down when it comes to the redesign of the West 3rd Street facade. This seems to have been prepared without reference to the excellent historic photographs provided and without the same care that went into the design of the non-public courtyard facades or the Minetta Lane facade. The mid-block courtyard will not be visible from any public way. It will not cause the destruction of any significant protected historic material, and since the building was designed in 2 phases by 2 different architects, it seems to be almost part of the natural evolution of this property. The proposed change to the utilitarian style Minetta Lane facade properly retains 2 historic features noted in the designation report and visible in the tax photos. These include the pair of exposed beams decorated with rosettes at the 1st story, which frame the historic stable doors. The corbelled brick cornice will also be retained. The modern infill at the ground floor will be removed, restoring the original openings. The proposed multi-light windows are not an original feature of this facade, but we find them suitable in the context of the South Village. The proposed canopy seems modest. On the West 3rd Street facade, we do not support any of the proposed ground floor changes. Rather than the proposed removal of even more historic masonry from the ground floor, the applicant should look to the historic photos to return a more solid ground floor base to balance the weight of the building above. The number of storefronts should be reduced to reflect this. The historic garage doors had multi-light transoms and paneled wood doors, and there may have been a contrasting water table at the base. Such features should be incorporated into the ground floor facade, including the new garage door and other doors and all the storefronts. The proposed storefront framing is an under-designed aluminum tube with infill of seemingly random and unpleasant proportions. The storefronts should be painted wood with a detailed profile, bulkheads, and multi-light transoms. HVAC vents should not be incorporated into the transoms in what is essentially an area of new construction. We realize that the courtyard is a floor above the storefronts, but the mechanical equipment should be vented into the courtyard or up to the roof or into window wells. The proposed storefront signs, consisting of cutout letters stuck to ventilation louvers, are an insultingly cheap design on what will be the most important public face of the building. On the upper floors, we support the installation of the multi-light aluminum windows, but the sills should not be dropped 2 courses. This would reduce the facade's solidity, an important historic characteristic of this building. The original window opening.
I'm sorry, John, could you summarize your testimony?
We also couldn't find a sample of the proposed window color, and finally, we find that the proposed rooftop addition is overly visible from too many locations. It should be reduced 1 story. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this item? All right, not seeing any hands raised, I'm going to turn it over to Gregory Kala to take us through our remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a few remote participants with their hands raised. The first we'll be hearing from is Chloe Gregoire from Village Preservation. Chloe Gregoire, I've promoted you to panelist. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good day, Commissioners. My name is Chloe Gregoire, and I'm speaking on behalf of Village Preservation. Village Preservation has several concerns regarding visibility of the proposed additions for this project. We find the 2-story rooftop addition over the West 3rd Street facade to be excessive. Lowering the addition to 1 story would significantly reduce the problematic extent of visibility over the primary facade and from viewpoints along 6th Avenue and McDougal Street, and would be more appropriate. We also find the proposed zinc cladding to be jarring and out of place. The brick cladding shown at the less visible 1st story of the penthouse is much better suited for this building, its history, and its context. Acknowledging that any rooftop addition above the Minetta Lane facade will be visible, we find the current proposal to be too prominent. An addition might be appropriate at this location if it were substantially reduced in massing, perhaps by angling the south wall back towards the center of the building, so that the addition does not overpower the historic Minetta Lane facade as viewed from Minetta Street. Finally, the proposed connector between the two portions of the building is too glassy and will be overly visible from 6th Avenue, especially at night when lit up. The fenestration of the connector should be restudied and revised to better suit the historic context. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Nick Winter. Nick Winter, I am promoting you to panelist. Please state your name for the record and unmute your line. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name for the record and you can begin.
Yes, my name is Nick Winter. I reside with my wife on Minetta Street, fairly close to the intersection of Minetta Lane. I also attended the CB2 meeting on January 16th to comment on this project. In general, I'd say that we're in favor of the project and the development of the building, particularly the improvements that would result on Minetta Lane. This area of Minetta Lane is fairly dead, not particularly busy, and often populated by vagrants and drug users. So the addition of townhouse entrances and a small entrance that's smaller than the West 3rd entrance at the back of the building on Minetta Lane would be most welcome to improve quality of life for all of us. From a design perspective, I know a number of people who objected to the addition of windows on the Minetta Lane side. Practically speaking, given the building's use is now intended for humans and not horses and cars, I think the additional light is a reasonable request on the part of the architect and developer. We'll let the LPC decide as to what the finish should be on the lane, as you're more expert in these things. I would say that on the West 3rd Street side, in which perhaps we have arguably sort of less interest, some reference was made in the CB2 recommendation about a disarray of openings. This actually isn't really the case because only one additional opening has been introduced, and most of the original openings are remaining. In addition, I just would like to point out that in the CB2 recommendation, where it states in recital L that the public in the neighborhood would object to the project, that's actually not what I said at the meeting. I was in support of the project at the meeting, and others, some of whom spoke today in person, once they have specific objections to certain aspects of the project, we're generally in favor of redevelopment of the site. I think that more or less summarizes our perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC is a passionate advocate for adaptive reuse and residential conversion citywide. We applaud the creation of new housing here, and we feel the project would be an even greater asset to the neighborhood if the applicant gave further consideration to the design and detailing of the street-level retail and garage door infill. In terms of mechanicals, HDC notes the proposed HVAC louvers are venting to the front and wonders whether they could instead vent to the courtyard or the roof, which we think would be more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised. If you would like to speak on this item and you haven't, please click the raise hand button now so I can call on you. Okay, there are still no hands raised. So I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the 3rd Street facade restoration, retaining of the sign and the residential windows, denial of what is in essence demolition of the existing 3rd Street ground floor facade with its distinctive large garage entrances and the addition of generic modern fittings into a new smaller bays, and denial of any arrangement that does not preserve the distinctive historic existing garage openings, denial of the highly visible, starkly modern 2-story addition which may be acceptable for visibility as a one-story addition and in a design with historic references, especially the finish and windows. Denial of the Minetta Lane one-story addition in that is highly visible, as it would be any rooftop to this portion of the building from Minetta Street, an intimate and unique corner of the district. Approval with reservations of the very minimally visible courtyard, which could be improved with fenestration more suitable to the historic buildings. Denial of the non-historic fenestration of the Minetta Street carriage entrances unless it is in a design that recalls the historic doors with considerably less glazing, and that the Minetta Street facade be restored in unpainted brick, and approval of the Minetta Street upper floor opening and addition of windows matching the historic design. We also received 3 letters from separate individuals recommending denial, one recommending approval, a letter from Open Plans recommending approval, and finally, a petition with 23 separate signatures recommending denial. And with that, I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll. Oh, and I apologize, one letter recommending approval from Borough President Mark Levine. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Thank you very much. So would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Thanks. Christopher and I will both respond. I think the first thing to note, just in that recitation, I think, this project, Patrick has been thinking about the rehab of this building for many years and has, through the whole process, engaged his immediate neighbors. And I think the participation and the response, I think, is reflective of that. And clearly, there's a real mix of opinions. Both of those sort of in the immediate neighborhood of the project and perhaps even those beyond. So I think it's interesting that there's support and also concern for certain aspects of the project. I think we were heartened to hear that the borough president was recommending support for the project, which I think is really meaningful in the overall context of the project and the city. So Christopher is going to address a couple of the ground floor, the comments related to the Minetta Lane entry and the storefronts along 3rd Street, and I'll address some of the broader issues regarding visibility.
Yeah, let's start here. So just to point out really to start with the openings on the facade. So as we mentioned earlier, let's start with the parking garage entry on the left and the residential entry next to it. The widths of those are exactly the same as what exists today. The third and the central is a new opening. The size of that, we sort of matched what's the one on the right. The fourth from the left, which shows no doors currently in this rendering, that's the existing opening size as well. And then the opening all the way on the right has been reduced back to what the existing opening width was. So as far as the widths of these, there is inconsistency that is an existing condition in terms of the widths, and that's mostly to be maintained. And then obviously there's a new door on the right that's more of a use requirement. That's an egress door out of the building. If we look at the plan as well, just back here. Again, the main entry to the building is the lobby on West 3rd on the top of the plan here. That was originally, the main entry originally was on Minetta Lane. That was moved in response to discussions of our client with some of the neighbors. So there is still a requirement for a second means of egress out the south facade there. It's definitely a much narrower opening. We did originally have 2 doors for the opening on Minetta, and those have been reduced to 1. So the width of that is still, the width of the opening is still the same, and that's a sort of proportional thing to work with the rest of the facade. But the door itself is just a singular 3-foot door, single panel door, and it's much narrower in width, at least than the main lobby. And so the intent and the hope is that most residents would use the larger lobby entrance on West 3rd, which is also closer to the elevators. We obviously can't control how people use the building, but that would be the intent and the hope.
Thank you. And I just want to address some of the comments regarding visibility. I think, it's interesting. People characterize visibility in many different ways. So the community board resolution characterized the addition as highly visible. Others have, characterized it as limited visibility. I think, understanding the visibility of the addition from directly across the street is significant. To address Commissioner Ginsburg's comments about the floor heights, they are consistent with the floor heights below. It's just pretty typical for an approach for rooftop additions. They're certainly no taller than the floors below. And I think, as one moves around, I'm not going to go through all of the views, but I think as one moves around the building, one begins to see that there is greater visibility as you get further away from the building, but they are these oblique views. You're seeing them frequently sort of through trees and in the context of side elevations of other buildings in the district. So I think just in thinking about some of the other commission approvals particularly for 1- and 2-story garage buildings, I think this is consistent with what has been found to be quote unquote moderate visibility as per previous approvals. So I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Okay. Commissioner Ginsburg?
The coating on Minetta Lane,
Yes.
is that a coating that you can't get off
It's-
without damaging the brick?
It is cementitious, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Any final questions? Just one question about the visibility. So in this view, I understand that on Minetta Lane, across the street on 3rd Street, you see a little bit of each of them. And then from this view, you see it, albeit through trees and between other side facades over the primary facade on 3rd Street.
Right.
But many of the other views, you actually don't see it in connection with the building itself. Is that right?
Correct. So I'm happy to scroll through this, but as this is now diagonally sort of with your looking in line with basically the previous view. So you're seeing a sliver of the addition. And then as you come around, you're sort of seeing into this. So, historically, buildings filled this void, and then during the construction of the subway, those all came down. So now you're seeing sort of into the body of that block. So now you see that open space, the back of the 3rd Street addition and the back of the Minetta Lane addition. So, right, you're seeing through this, but you're not really seeing the historic buildings in any of these views. And then even as you go down to down Carmine Street, you're really not seeing the historic building. So it's a mix of views where you see it in the context of a piece of the addition, of the historic elevation, and others where you don't see it at all.
Okay. Any final questions, commissioners? Right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So this is an adaptive reuse project, and we have often embraced adaptive reuse as a strong preservation tool to find new uses to keep our historic buildings viable and relevant. And in doing so, we have allowed for change, and including things like creating new window openings in blank facades or enlarging window openings, reconfiguring storefronts, and rooftop additions, especially where there's a cutout required to facilitate that adaptive reuse. And so this project includes many of those aspects, those components. And so we'll discuss both the 3rd Street elevation, which includes shifting an opening and creating a new opening, or reducing one opening and creating a new opening, and signage and louvers, multi-light aluminum windows, and then the 2-story rooftop addition on Minetta. There is reopening of 2 former enclosed openings with new multi-light infill, a new egress door, new line of windows, the aluminum multi-light windows, and the 1-story rooftop addition. Then, of course, there's the removal of the lot line walls and the rear walls in the courtyard to create the 30-foot rear yard that's required for residential use. So we'll discuss all aspects of this. Commissioner Goldblum.
Thanks. This is a project that has a lot to like about it. I really have to give congratulations to the team. I think it's a very important project for the neighborhood. and a very good model for adaptive reuse. I think there's a lot to talk about because there's a lot of moving parts, and I'll try to be brief. I think that there's no one more reliable to talk about structural matters than Nat Oppenheimer, but I would ask the applicant to work with staff to make sure that the removal of the historic side walls is necessary in all locations at all areas. And if there can be work done that would allow for their preservation, I think we should make efforts to do so. I think that the facade on Minetta Lane, the reopening of the tall openings is great. I think that the added windows, the paired windows is fine. I think that the rooftop addition there is fine in size and material. I think that the center door, and I think one thing that I would suggest as a kind of an overarching theme, so to speak, is that there's a quality of density and solidity to the two buildings that makes them like each other and gives them a particular character. And I think that to the extent that I would suggest modifications to the design, it would be in order to preserve that quality, if not every aspect of it. So when you make the door on Minetta Lane and you give it two side lights, maybe you can live with one side light and you can make it more solid so that you have that street feel of a solid wall is preserved to the extent that you can while opening up those historic openings. And I think the same, I think that Mark's thoughts about the brick being coated, it is always a concern about the brick being coated, work with staff on appropriate coatings that will be long lasting and that won't cause moisture problems. On West 3rd, I think that the modification of the window openings in the main body of the building are acceptable. I think that the garage door can be studied with. Part of the charm of the garage building, and it's been a garage for a fairly long time in active use, is that variation on the streetscape that I was talking about. And I think to the extent that this regularizes and commercializes that stretch of streetscape, I think it goes a little too far. So I think that the garage door, you might look at doing a wood door that would have some historic qualities to it. The garage door that was shown in the photos was certainly not an original door. And so I don't think there's a particular design. You don't need to hew to a 1940s overhead door, but I think that having something there that is reproduction-ish in quality would be an asset. I think that the entrance to the building is fine. There was some comment in the staff about the canopy. I think that for the marquee, I think that can be reviewed with staff if they feel it needs to be lightened. The middle opening and the other retail openings, I have a little bit more concern about. I understand the need for retail to have openings, and that's a part of the adaptive reuse program. But I think that you could carry down some of the smaller scale openings that one sees on the historic photos onto that streetscape without fatally compromising a proposed retail use there. And I think that the applicant should explore how to do that best. The thing that struck me about the streetscape views from the 40s was its irregularity and its kind of density. I think that density where it's a punched hole with a brick sill, there's a pleasant and appropriate quality to that speaks of the whole building. And I think that's especially important at the streetscape where you really experience it. I think that the rooftop additions, people have spoken about it in testimony and here. I think that there's no question that the applicant should seek to lower the ceiling heights on the interior to allow for the thing to be less visible. It seems to be a no-brainer. 9 feet seems to be plenty high for ceilings in most of New York. I think that we should try to limit visibility, and we should then think about that which is visible, making it blend a little bit better with the overall cityscape in that part of the town. I think that to that end, You might explore having the party walls be brick instead of the metal. I think you could look at the color of the metal. I think you could look at the angle of the metal wall. It's kind of an almost vertical wall that barely tilts a bit. It's like almost construction error level of tilt. So I think that, you know, you could look at setting it back, tilting it more, making it more glass, having it resemble more of the Northlight if that's where you want to take it. But there's something about it that just feels a bit overmuch to me. And I think that once you bring it down and modify that front most visible part, I think it'll go a long way towards making the whole thing feel more appropriate, a better fit in the neighborhood. I think the courtyard is fantastic. I'm jealous of the courtyard residents.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg.
Thank you. So first I have to say, I remember meeting my father at this garage when he parked his car about 40 years ago. So and I remember it well for whatever reason. I'm happy to see a proposal where we're going to house people instead of cars. So it was a beginning, and I agree with most of Michael's comments, but this is a positive change. These are very utilitarian buildings, and I think some of my comments, which tie into some of Michael's, is keeping them a little, not making them too neat. You know, as I said, the design is very thoughtful. You need the courtyards for light and air, and as Michael said, they're very nice. In general, the Minetta Lane openings make sense, and I understand you need the door because having two stairs enter into the lobby, you need two ways out, so that makes sense. I agree with Michael, look at lowering the addition, and I think his comment on the sidewalls is good. Just make it a little less regular, like it's rooftop accretions, but and then I would suggest one thing to consider on the coating on Minetta Lane. Instead of making it all uniform, if you put a clear coating over the whole thing and kept the somewhat weathered peeling, I think that would potentially fit into the historic age nature. And the issue we often have is we renovate a building and we make it totally pristine and new. But you know, whether this all can be done in staff or you come back, but I think with some little tweaks, this is easily approvable.
Thank you, Commissioner Chapin.
So I think the overall design, including the courtyard, is very successful. I mean, the adaptive reuse is terrific. It's a great thing to see happen, and very necessary in the city at this point, where we have not enough affordable housing. But in any event, I think that the setbacks of the rooftop additions are excellent. The materials that have been chosen for the building and the rooftop in general, I think, are very good. The connector, I think, is fine, a good element, and the courtyard is a really nice amenity. My concerns are that the rooftop massing really does seem to be a lot between it's a combination of, you know, the additional space and the bulkheads and the mechanicals. And while, you know, there were a lot of good examples shown that we've approved before, many of times those buildings were at least a story taller than the one we're looking at today. So, and the visibility is, you know, unfortunately quite a bit. So I agree with others that we ought to try to find ways to decrease the visibility and impact of the massing of the rooftop addition. I have one disagreement with the design in general, which others may not share so far, which is on the Minetta side. I actually find the going to the stable as a you know, a model I don't feel, I feel like those windows are really just too hot, too tall. And that the side windows should be shorter and not use the stable as a model, but just have smaller windows. They don't have to be as small as the originals, obviously. But I think that for the streetscape, that the scale would be, I think it would fit in better in the streetscape if the scale were not so large. So those are my only negative comments on the project.
And you're talking about the additional line of windows, not the reopened storefront windows or ground floor
I'm
windows.
talking about the ground floor windows.
Oh, it's ground floor. Okay.
Those are the ones
Got
that concern me. The treatment of the other windows in general on both sides, I'm good with. That's fine.
Okay, great. I'm glad I clarified that. Commissioner Lutfi?
So I'm going to echo my enthusiasm for the project that my fellow commissioners have already expressed. And I think it's fantastic that this building is finally being developed after, all of this time having passed with its just sitting there. On a very important street in a very important location in the center of Greenwich Village. So this is a challenge. The applicant's trying to make this into housing. My sense is it's going to be condos, which is why there is a concern on the applicant's part about ceiling height. Because that's kind of an important selling tool and it helps with light and with air. That said, since the floor heights are going to be reset anyway and made uniform, I'm just going to speak holistically. People have made recommendations about bringing down the height of the addition. I just feel that there is room to bring down the height here to lessen the visibility without compromising what your goals are for the project. You're at 11.8. There's a lot of room there before you get to 9 feet, which I can appreciate is somewhere you don't want to go. So I think you should look at that from a in terms of the openings on the ground floor where the garage is. I'm okay with the size of the openings, but for some reason or other, they do feel a little utilitarian to me. I feel like they need a little more something that speaks more to the facade and the windows. And I mean, I don't know, because there was a garage here, there was a little more bulk to begin with, and now it feels a little more neuter to me. And I do think the canopy is a little bit too deep. The other thing I'd like to say is that there's really not enough detail about the signage. It's really presented in a way that kind of masks it, and I'd like to get, because of this block, I think, it's a small block, meaning narrow. I think the size of the letters and how they're going to be made and attached and everything, I feel like you just need to provide more detail and more thought surrounding it. And just speaking, I'm just going to throw something else in about the visibility. It's not, for me, there's so much going on 6th Avenue in a way that visibility wasn't bothering me that much. But it's the visibility from some of the smaller streets, like, Carmine and Bleecker, Minetta and McDougal. So that speaks to me to the fact that you need to address the height, and it would also be good to address the materiality that you use, because I feel like the standing seam is not consistent with what we're looking at visually in this neighborhood. And then I'm fine with the windows, the addition of the windows on Minetta Lane. I think Diana made a very interesting point that I hadn't really thought about, is that maybe, you could take another look at the windows at the ground. I'm not sure of what's there, but if it's residential, that's a lot of glass. From a privacy standpoint, it's not so great from a living space perspective. Otherwise, the courtyard's fine, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu.
Yeah, I think it's a very cool project, adapted reuse of a very simple, existing historic structure. I have some comments about some of the details, but overall, I just wanted to say that I do think, if I look at the streetscape, the thing that stands out to me is the sort of ratio of window to masonry that this building has that gives it, and its unusual width compared to the residential apartment buildings that are next to it. So it does really command a place on the street because of its size. What troubles me, ultimately, I think it's a great project, and I think that the moves are all appropriate. What I'm looking at right now is I can approve a slight enlargement of all those windows, but I personally feel that I wouldn't have taken the center, put an opening in the center opening at the ground floor. I just feel that at the street level and in terms of the reading of this facade as being predominantly masonry, that centerpiece actually kind of set it apart from the other buildings. In terms of the treatment of the ground floor, I don't have an issue with the sizes of the other openings. I do feel that there does need to be a little bit more care and craft to the detailing, which I'd like to see in the storefront. There were comments about the ventilation above, the signage as well. I would like to see more detail. I think the architect is skilled and could provide details here that really speak more to the human scale and experience, which is really, to me, the cool thing about the change of the use of this building, and that will be perceived at street level. In terms of the rear facade, I'm okay with the addition of those windows because it is frankly apartment use behind it, and they are in keeping with the existing windows that are there. The center door bothers me a bit, and I would echo previous comment about simplifying it and not drawing too much attention to that center, because those two historic openings are really what I want to focus on. And the same comment there, I would like to see a little bit more detail on those big glazed storefronts at the historic openings. Above the addition, I share a bit of a concern about the mass of the addition and its prominence. I think the setbacks help a lot. Part of it for me is also, I don't have an issue with standing seam. If it's zinc, I actually quite like it. If it's a little darker, it shows weathering, and I think it could be very nice. It just seems like in the images, it does seem to bring a lot of attention to itself. And that's a combination of its height and its palette, the color. I think that there are many options here. It seems like it's too bright to me when I look at it visually. And also the way that the floor line is cut between the two floors seems to emphasize the upper floor much more in mass than the lower. And I would try to flip that relationship and have the upper piece feel a little more receding. I do agree with the fellow commissioners about looking at ways of just taking a little bit of height out on the floor to floors. Otherwise, overall, the courtyard, I think, is very nice. And it's a very interesting case study project. It's very exciting.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Master.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the other comments. and I'm going to start with what Michael said about the sidewalls. I would also encourage the applicant to look and make sure that the removal of the sidewalls are necessary, because if you remove the sidewalls, really what we have is the front facade on 3rd Street and then the front facade on Minetta Lane. I think the courtyard is very clever and well done. And on 3rd Street, I believe that Michael had said something about, so my biggest comment, I think, is going to be regarding the 1st floor of 3rd Street, which is really where people are going to be engaging with this building on the street level. I think that we need to get a lot more detail in terms of, the retail stores. And I think that the marquee might be a little bit too thick. And perhaps that garage door, I think Michael had said something about potentially referencing its history, perhaps as a stable, I don't know, incorporating something a little bit more engaging, I guess, on the 1st floor of the 3rd Street. I'm fine with the fenestration, both on 3rd Street and on Minetta Lane. The only other thing that I wanted to address was the visibility. I think I'm going to disagree with the other commissioners by saying that when I looked at the visibility, I found it acceptable. I think from the street, you see a little bit, but not much at all. And then from the oblique views, covered by trees for most of the season, I didn't find the views overwhelming at all. I thought it was acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
After all that, I don't have much to add, but I have two issues to add. One of them is, I think the height of the rooftop addition should be reduced. Just common sense stuff. But I must commend these guys, because this bridge that they did, it's a lovely bridge. Can you imagine sitting there and the sun coming in and the reflected light? It's just marvelous. That's it.
Okay. All right, great. So thank you all for your thoughtful comments. So we're not going to take an action today, but I think we have a lot of support for this project and the approach you've taken to adaptively reuse these buildings, including the demolition in the courtyard in the middle and reconfiguring that space on the roof and reconfiguring the masonry openings. But there are some suggestions, I think really good suggestions about how you can rethink these components, particularly the rooftop addition and the ground floors, to really recall the historic typology a little bit more and relate more to the character of the district. And that includes thinking about solid to void and materiality and details. And I think many commissioners asked to see more details for the storefronts and the signs as well. So we won't take an action today, and we'll have you back as soon as you're ready. All right, thank you. Thanks. All right, we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 8, LPC 25-06122, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1389, Lot 50, 945 Madison Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a modern style museum building designed by Marcel Breuer and Associates and built in 1964 to 66. The application is to construct a rooftop bulkhead and install signage, lighting, and an element beneath the canopy.
You can just go right up to the mic and begin. Just introduce yourself before you start.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Wrightson. I head up our real estate for Sotheby's and excited to talk to you guys about our project today. So just a couple of words about Sotheby's before we get into the presentation. So, for us, this building, this is super exciting for us to be able to move our headquarters for our auctions and our exhibitions to the Breuer building. Is a no pun intended, it's a landmark moment for us in our organization, our over 200-year company history. we are honored and privileged to be the next stewards of this building. We fully understand the historical significance and how much of an icon in the architectural world this building is. And I think that'll come across very clearly in our presentation to you today. We exhibit, I would say arguably the world's best art collections. And again, we're very excited to bring that to this building, reopen it to the public, and again, free of charge. And we do expect to be accessible to the public nearly every day of the year. So partnering with us on this project is Herzog Demurin and PBDW, who will take you through the presentation today. So with that, I will pass over to Wim Walshap to lead us off. Thank you.
So my name is Wim Walshap, senior partner at Herzog & de Meuron. I give you a very short introduction on behalf of the design team. We are partnering for this project together with PBDW. This is because we have worked together in the past. We have worked, for example, on the Powerhouse Arts in Brooklyn. We also did together, and we are still doing together, the Park Avenue Armory in Manhattan. So we continue this very successful partnership. There is Brigitte Cook, Senior Associate from PBDW. She will guide us through the presentation today. And from our team, there is Phil Schmerbeck, who is our studio director here in New York and has been involved in every project we realized in the city and outside of New York. There is Jackie B., also associate at Herzog & de Meuron, and together with myself, it's the core team working on this project. A few words about the building. You can talk long, of course, but it's clear that this is an amazing architectural icon of post-war modernism, brutalism, to be more correct. And also, like many others, you including, I guess, we always admired this building. So it is really an honor to be involved and to work on this project. And just to step back and look at the portfolio of Herzog & de Meuron, then you can see that already from the 70s, we actually were very interested in thinking about existing structures and building, reuse of these structures, and not just because of sustainability background only, but also as a very conscious engagement with the historic and the existing, and to see how we could make these buildings fit for their future uses or a new program. And just like, for example, in the Park Avenue Armory, we are working on this project with a lot of excitement, but even more so with a lot of respect. So holding back, the ambition is limited, clearly, out of respect. And it's maybe bringing back certain things that were lost over time. And it's all about very subtle interventions. And as such, to make the building ready for its new function, the auction world. It will stay a house for art, which is great. And it will be, again, a building that is fully accessible for the general public and also for the people of New York. So I hand over now to Brigitte, who guides us through the full presentation.
I'm not sure how to advance. Okay. Hello, I am Bridget Cook. I am with PBDW Architects. We are the architects of record and the preservation architect working alongside Herzog & de Meuron team very closely. Today, we're here to present our project, which is a great opportunity for Sotheby's and our design team to preserve and ensure the continued vitality of this significant New York architecture, to facilitate the compatible new use as an auction house and galleries. As we have looked at the building, approached it, one of the most special things that we noticed right away is
the preservation over time of the facades. We are dedicated to continuing that legacy of preserving the integrity and the authenticity of the building as it remains. To understand the character of the building, we have all immersed ourselves in the architecture, all of us on the design team here, from in our own special ways, from studying archives, just tactile interaction with the building, reading text, and we're slowly starting to really, understand the character and the authenticity of the building. So principal to our project is a principal guiding key is that we are not altering the exterior facades, these iconic views of the building. Okay, so we will go over, we have three discrete application components for our facade, for our exterior work. The first is an elevator bulkhead, which is on the roof. And the second is a canopy treatment on the Madison Avenue facade. And the third is the signage at the Madison Avenue facade. So here we have the location of our building on the Upper East Side Historic District. The building has also recently been calendared as an interior and an individual landmark. We're on the southeast corner of 75th and Madison Avenue. And on the left is a photograph, an aerial view showing the context of the existing building, which remains much the same as it was when it was constructed, with adjacent low-rise residential buildings and corner taller buildings. So you can see from this 1967 Sanborn map, very similar arrangement of these varying height buildings and a dialogue between new and old. Here are photographs of the street for context, which again shows that. And here we have our exterior elevations showing the areas of work. So on the Madison Avenue facade on the left, we have the canopy outlined in red, along with the proposed vitrine signage change. And then on the right, we have the 75th Street facade, which on the top is outlined in red, where we have the proposed elevator bulkhead. So here we have sections of the building. On the left is the existing section, and on the right is the proposed section. Our principal addition to the project is a freight elevator. And this proposed freight elevator is very carefully located at the back of the facade to minimize impact to the historic fabric interior, and also to minimize the view from the street. So its location is serving both of those goals. So the original elevator, if you see on the left, which is in white, that was the freight elevator, it only extended from the freight area, the delivery area on the ground level down to storage. And then artwork would be transferred within the lobby over to a second freight elevator that rise the rest of the way up to the building. So Sotheby's, like any auction house, has the need for more frequent operational movement of artwork. And that is in order to keep galleries open at all times. We have a need for a more efficient system to carry the artwork up and down the building without impacting the public. So that is the red is the new proposed freight elevator. Our goal is for there to be a seamless experience of the visitor to the building on the inside and on the street once this new elevator is added. Here is a plan referencing the location of the freight elevator on the roof plan. I'll point out on the top right where that outline is. That's the partial roof plan that's then shown on the left. So we can see here, we've labeled the size as 19 feet wide for this bulkhead, which is tucked directly between the existing stair bulkhead and interior space on the top floor, a conference room that we are keeping. Here's an axon view, which shows this location better, I think. On the left is the existing, and on the right is the proposed. So in yellow is the proposed elevator bulkhead. And here is a closer view of that. This is the existing bulkhead as it is, or roof as it is today. And then with the addition of the proposed elevator bulkhead, you can see it's 10'3" above the existing stair bulkhead. These are photographs from the roof as it is today. On the upper right photograph, you'll see you're looking towards the area where we are proposing to add the elevator bulkhead in place of where there's a skylight right now. You see the skylight curve, and then past that is the stair bulkhead that exists, that will remain. So we built a orange covered scaffold mocking up the elevator bulkhead. And this is the views walking down the street on Madison with this mock-up in place. The upper rightmost image is the only location where you see a sliver of the bulkhead. I can't see it, but other people have. Obviously, I'm not tall enough, but right in between that guardrail and the top of the parapet wall, there's a little sliver that sticks up, but that is the only location that any of it is visible. And then walking along on 75th Street, you do not see the mock-up or the future elevator bulkhead until you walk past the building. Once you are about 20 feet past, you see it, and then on the next slide, you see here the maximum visibility location, which is 100 feet past the building. And then the red zone on the map notes how far back you can see the mock-up. And when you're all the way back on Park, you don't see the mock-up connected to the building itself anymore, like the point you were that came up on the last presentation. Okay, and then go into, here's a closer up view of the mock-up showing the dimensions. And of course, we'll go into the proposed materiality and texture, which is not anything like this slide is showing. So we looked at the existing treatment of the party walls. Here is the east party wall, where you see the stepped parapet and stepped party wall at the edge where the stair bulkhead is existing. On the south, the party wall is stepped, capping and framing the edge of the building as the building steps itself. And we're really interested in the way that this texture of the existing building was treated. So the effort to go into this board formed concrete texture that alternates like a patchwork and changes in directionality as it goes up the side of the building. So we studied the archival drawings and looked at the directionality, the different portions surrounding it, and looked at the original details and the reveals and the corner treatments. So here is our proposed treatment of the texture and treatment of that wall. And the proposal is for all sides of the walls to be treated the same way, matching the original intent of the board form concrete on all exterior surfaces. So the left is existing, on the right is our proposal. So you can see how the new elevator bulkhead does overlap over the existing stair bulkhead, which we'll talk about in a minute. The directionality is in the vertical orientation, which we found was similar all the way around the building, in all cases ending in a vertical orientation. So we are proposing to match that. And then also create a joint in the board form patterning to align with the top of the coping of the existing stair bulkhead. Here's a detail elevation showing that connection between the existing stair bulkhead, which is in darker gray, and the proposed, which is in the lighter gray. For illustrative purposes, it's meant to be the same color in the actual realization of it. And then the detail for the reveal, and then on the right is a detail we're working with Silman to help make sure we preserve that existing stair bulkhead wall and connect the new board form concrete wall to the old, making sure we are transferring loads with adhesive dowels from one of the new wall to the existing. So now I will move into the entry proposal. So this is the view of the existing building when viewed across the street today. This was taken a couple of weeks ago. The building right now is the entry is very dark, and it is not welcoming this entrance, and it also doesn't meet code compliance. So we are required to provide 2-foot candles of light from the edge of the building to the street over that bridge continuously. So we've been looking at, how to deal with this issue and have explored many options, and I'll take you through that. But I want to first show some historic images that we found for interest. So as we've been pouring through the archives and information, we found dozens of original renderings and models by Breuer and drawings showing the bridge without a canopy. And we see in this middle picture Jackie Kennedy visiting what looks to be the construction kickoff in October of 1965. And there's a photo in this one of a board that shows still the absence of the canopy over this bridge. There are other photos that we could show you examples of that also show more boards without canopies at this time. So what we thought that was an interesting note, that this seems to have been added. It was not the original design, but it seems that this canopy got added as part of the during construction, which we know happens on many projects. But what we thought, it seems that somewhere along the way this canopy lighting wasn't resolved. So when we looked at the Ezra Stoller photographs, who was invited to take photographs once the building was opened, the lighting of the canopy is this uplit glow. It's very inviting, and we don't see any evidence in the construction or in any drawings showing this lighting effect. So we've been trying to figure out, does this mean that there were temporary lights that were set up and overexposure and the tripod that, allowed this bright light effect? But we've been trying to figure out how can we recreate this aspirational, version of the, entry that is welcoming and a friendly, inviting place at night. So on the left is the existing canopy as it is today, and on the right is our proposal. So what we have proposed is a bronze plate to be installed and fastened underneath of the existing concrete canopy. So why bronze? We looked at, into many different materialities and ways to resolve this. And we think that bronze is appropriate. It's one of the 3 principal materials on the building. And in a pamphlet 6 months after the building was opened, it talks about the raw concrete, the flamed granite, stone, and bronze being the three principal materials on the building. And what we're trying to do is create this soft light effect on the upper canopy, but also make the canopy, the bridge paving lit up. So we believe that if, in order to just have concrete alone as the treatment, a harsh light would need to be directed towards that canopy. And that would, that was never built because that would be, an offensive light coming at you as you're trying to walk through this limited space of the bridge. So the way that this is detailed, we draw clues from what's existing in the building and the original details by Breuer. We looked at, the way that there was this conscientious choice to clad this concrete stepped, shaped facade with granite, these flamed edge granite, and not to just have, raw concrete everywhere. It's very strategically placed. And there are many interior details of bronze and other accessories that are inset into recessed planes with a border of concrete, which I'll show in a minute. So the idea here in this proposal is that we would have very discrete lights that would be mounted from the ground that would point downwards, and light would reflect back up towards this bronze panel. So here's another view of the treatment of the bronze panel when looking out, leaving from the bridge. Here are examples of the bronze existing on the building. There are many, but these are a few. There are bronze doors, there are the bronze plaques, the handrails are bronze, and there are lots of accessories. So, and the lighting, edging, lots of trim. Oh, and that one image showed the concrete recess and the framed concrete edging around it. Here are some more examples of the concrete inset recesses with the tooled concrete border around these different accessories that were built in. So we have, for reference, construction drawings, this area. And here we have photographs showing the existing canopy detail. So there is a channel that exists as a perimeter reveal, and that is where we are proposing to attach a channel to then attach the plate, so that we would not be connecting into the surface of the underside of the canopy in the concrete. So here's a drawing showing the overall proposal, and then detail shots showing this channel where the fasteners would be inset and attached into that reveal. And then our proposal for the discrete lighting that would have, we would have diffused light coming out of that. Here is another reference of a floating panel within the building. So this is an original detail, also by Breuer, where a plaster panel is suspended underneath right as you walk into the entry. And here is an example of our proposal for the lighting, that we would have the soft lighting that would have continuous light on the path below, and then which would capture some reflecting light on the bronze panel above. And here's our final proposal of our vitrine signage. So this is an original detail on the building. The existing, the left is original except for this one little appendage that was added somewhere along the way. So there was originally a light fixture installed in this vitrine, and the little glass door opens and posters are mounted, and then it is illuminated at night. So we are not proposing any change to that. We are proposing very discreet lettering that would be bronze, and it would be held up with little clips at the bottom that would be set into the front with set screws and a spacer. And then, so it would be clipped, and then on the bottom side is a reveal that runs all the way across, and we would be fastening into that reveal. At night, there would be soft illumination behind it with halo lit lettering. And it would not be a moving image inside of this vitrine box. And here's a detail of that vitrine. And this is on the right, you can see the reveal that exists, and that's where we would fasten into the bottom of the concrete. And then a little bronze bar to connect the simple lettering together. So with this, I conclude our presentation and welcome your questions.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
The elevator bulkhead seems quite high. Did you look at using a machine roomless elevator?
Yes, we did. That's a great question. That was one of my first questions. And our elevator consultant looked into that and explained that because we are lifting heavy freight equipment, that it is too big to use a machine roomless elevator.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Commissioner Lutfi. Just wanted.
Is this signage on the vitrine the only place where you're going to have the name Sotheby's?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for reinforcing that.
Oh, yes.
Well, there is an existing historic flagpole that they'll be removing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you'll be using that as well.
Those are actually standing in front of the building in the recess.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel.
And yeah, in the dark picture. There, right there. You see the two.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You have, see my hand there? Right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then another question, and maybe this is just, why is it that if it's bronze that it appears black in in your photo?
Which
The Sotheby's. Under the vitrine, the
Oh, it's
Sotheby's.
a patinaed bronze. So
Mhm.
there's different bronzes on the projects, like the doors for the front door are also patinaed black and bronze. And so that's the same treatment. So all of a lot of the linear elements that Breuer was using are all in this darkened bronze, and then other elements are in the brighter bronze. So the lettering just felt a little more sort of timeless, and also the frame just around the vitrine itself, right next to it is the dark patina bronze.
Got it.
Yes, Commissioner Chu.
What's the condition of the board forms underside of the canopy?
It's been weathered for quite some time, so for whatever reason, we don't know exactly why they have darkened more at the underside of the canopy than other places.
But there's a drip edge all around that.
Even with the drip edge, we're not exactly sure why it's so dark there. It could be water having seeped from the top. This is conjecture. But also it is in shadow, so there's not a lot of horizontal board form concrete on the project. So it's one of the few
What
places.
is the top of it?
The top is waterproofed.
It is
so
waterproof.
You saw there was a scupper on the side image that Bridget shared, so there is water treatments. It's just no view of the top.
Right. And that I assume would be restored or replaced as needed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that'll be a part of the initial.
Right.
The initial work is just maintaining the exterior of the building. There will be some cleaning involved also. It's very light cleaning, non-invasive cleaning.
That picture is of the rear looking at How come I don't see the board corners? Is that because it's so close, it's sort of zoomed in that I'm not seeing the width of a panel of a board?
You see it on
Not
our
the left
screen.
side.
It's,
You know what I'm
it's just
saying? It's
dark.
hard to see
It's
it
just
there.
dark.
I
If
see
you
it,
look at
okay.
the original.
Yeah, you can see it on the
screen
left.
Here we have.
Yeah,
The
see
right
it
side is
slightly.
very hard to see, it's true.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right, we'll move to public testimony and we'll come back to you. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? John Graham?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society. While the brutalist style building by Marcel Breuer isn't an obvious focus for the Victorian Society, we believe it's important to review proposed work on important buildings of any era. Further, the maintenance of a building's stylistic integrity should be a universal principle. This architecturally important building has become an icon of Madison Avenue. We do not take issue with the proposed elevator bulkhead, but we do not see any need to alter the entrance. The original bronze details pictured are accents to the concrete. The proposed alteration is not an accent, but rather an attempt to turn the canopy into a flashy marquee that is not in keeping with Breuer's original design. Additionally, we would prefer if the Sotheby's backlit logo was not drilled into the wall. The new sign should work within the existing vitrine as Whitney, Met, and Frick did when they occupied the building. There are a few exceptional examples of brutalist style buildings in New York, and only 2 designated buildings by this important architect. We must work to preserve them as best as possible. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Zainab Turan?
Commissioners, my name is Zainab Turan, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends Preservation Committee is pleased to see that this iconic Breuer building will be under the care of the auction house Sotheby's while it awaits much anticipated individual and interior landmark status. Since its opening in 1966, the public has enjoyed uninterrupted access to this remarkable space, and we hope this continues with Sotheby's as its custodian. The committee does not oppose to the bulkhead or the changes in signage to the existing vitrine, but we strongly object to altering the underside of the canopy. The concrete under canopy has a beautiful patina that is integral to Breuer's design. It also plays a crucial role in the building's entry sequence as visioned by the architect. The canopy overhanging the sidewall creates a dramatic transition. You move from the open air to the covered concrete space, then into the building itself. This sequence with the canopy like a zigzag gradually enclosing you is a key element of the design and should be preserved. If the under canopy is dirty due to atmospheric soiling, resulting in diminished light reflection, cleaning, and potentially adding a discrete lighting solution would be more appropriate than covering it entirely with a bronze panel. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak on this item? All right, noting that there isn't, I'm going to turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one remote participant with their hand raised, that being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC feels the proposed addition of any metal to the underside of 945 Madison's architectural concrete entrance canopy is inappropriate. And we especially oppose the proposed polished and reflective metal because shiny reflective metal is inconsistent with the building's material palette. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Liz Waitukis. Liz Waitukis, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Commissioners. Liz Waitakis for Docomomo US. Docomomo US is pleased to see the broad steps by the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission is taking to designate the former Whitney Museum of American Art as a New York City individual interior landmark. We have reviewed the recent proposal adding an elevator bulkhead to the roof and changes to the exterior front entrance. Docomomo US does not take issue with the bulkhead and appreciates the sensitivity and consideration the design team has made to blend this modest elevation at the rear of the building into the existing fabric. We also do not take issue with the modestly proposed lettering on the vitrine, as the change is reversible and does not appear to damage any aspect of the original concrete. Docomomo US, however, is very concerned about the proposed changes to the entrance and the addition of the metal panel fitted beneath the board-formed concrete canopy. The proposed change to the canopy significantly modifies this dramatic entry sequence of stepping through the dark concrete portal over the sunken sculpture court and revealing to guests the light-filled lobby. This architectural idea of compression and release, first developed by Frank Lloyd Wright, is an integral element of the Breyer design. Any alterations to change the contrast of light and dark would significantly alter the enjoyment and experience of entering the building. We urge the team to reconsider the need for this element, and the Landmarks Preservation Commission deny this change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We have another Docomomo US with, okay. We have Docomomo Tri-State with their hand raised. So I'll be promoting them to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Here we are. Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. If you could please state your name, you could begin.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm John Arbuckle, president of Docomomo US New York Tri-State, a local chapter of Docomomo US, a national working group of Docomomo International, an organization founded in 1988, now working in over 70 countries to increase public awareness and appreciation of modern architecture, landscapes, and urban design, to identify and document local examples, and to advocate for the protection of those determined most significant. Since 1996, the chapter has been advancing this mission in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. After reviewing this proposal, Docomomo US New York Tri-State does not object to the addition of the elevator bulkhead and the changes in signage to the existing vitrine. In fact, after seeing today's presentation, I'd like to commend the effort with the bulkhead to match the existing texture and materials. However, we are opposed to the addition of a large reflective metal panel to the underside of the entrance canopy. Neither painting the underside of the canopy as previously proposed, nor installing either a bronze or stainless steel panel would be acceptable. We believe that uplighting the canopy from below would be a more appropriate solution here, which would add illumination while keeping the concrete texture on the underside of the canopy visible as the architect intended. In closing, let me add that Docomomo US New York Tri-State, in collaboration with Docomomo US, submitted an RFE to the Commission to designate the building's interiors in late 2023, and we are very grateful the Commission voted in December to calendar the building as both an interior landmark and an individually designated landmark. We strongly encourage the Commission to enact both designations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any additional hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2, Community Board 8 recommends approval of the new elevator and new elevator bulkhead and denial of the new lighting and ceiling treatment of the existing marquee. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, thank you. So I think most of the comments are focused on the canopy and the treatment of the canopy, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to respond.
I think the comments are fair, and I think it's clear that we are doing an effort. And of course, you can also resolve it just with light. It's for sure an option. We thought that the light, also because of code compliance, and so keeping that in mind, might be too intense, and that we would keep the light levels down and just have a very subtle, discrete reflection. That's why we brought in that metal plate. So there is a logic behind what we are doing. If there is a fundamental problem with adding something there, then that's fair enough. And then we will have to go back to a pure lighting solution. But I do think our proposal makes sense in what we are trying to do. It might actually, I mean, the pure light solution might be more obstructive than what we are proposing at the end.
And that is because with lighting, in order to be code compliant, it requires a certain intensity or wattage.
Yes, yes. And of course, I also appreciate very much the idea of the entrance sequence of the compression and decompression. It's clear we all like that. At the same time, we have to say that in the evening when you pass there, it is dark and not so great to pass there. It doesn't give you a safe feeling. We should also keep in mind that Sotheby's will have certain small evening events. There will be a restaurant again at the B1 level, so open for the public. So you need an entrance and you need an environment that is welcoming and also safe. Where it is today, with all respect, a bit of a dark corner.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Just to, go right ahead.
Cut off, or-
Please. After you.
I thought we weren't allowed to speak anymore.
You are, go to town.
Okay, so one other thing I just wanted to mention is that I think that the renderings are showing this rather brightly and reflective. And I think that, we would be, absolutely, part of the process, we're assuming would be working with you to mock it up and come up with different finishes. I think that it's hard to portray this in a rendering. And, this idea of the bronze plate. I also want to mention that we had early on talked about edge lighting it, and it seemed that we were interrupting the plane and understanding of this, flat plane through the underside of the canopy. So that was another thing that came up in the community board, which was really helpful to our discussions. And then also that, it's not just about for Sotheby's, but it's for everyone to have a space that feels welcome and, a nice place to stand on the street and not uncomfortable at night.
So my question was about your thoughts on the Esto photo relative to what you are proposing.
Yeah.
Thank you for going to that page. And what's, the little that I know about that period and the use of architectural photography in that period is that it was very much, the people who did the work thought about it as being shot by them and kind of made the shots as a signature about how they saw the work. That's how I've always learned about it. Could be wrong, but that's what I understood. And this is a very striking and unusual view of this building that definitely has an approach about lighting, right? And your comments about not being able to find any sources for those lights, it makes it all the more kind of fascinating because it's like, all right, clearly somebody wanted to put those lights there to make that picture, either Breuer or Stoller or some combination thereof. And clearly somebody liked it because it got out there and it became the, a signature image of the building. How did that image reflect your approach to the lighting in the canopy specifically?
Well, very much, very much. And I mean, as a designer myself, I think it's interesting because sometimes, for example, a photographer sees your building or can capture your building even better than you ever thought you could. So I'm pretty sure that this is trying to reflect what the intention was.
Right.
Also keeping in mind the heavy lightness. That we know that principle from Marcel Breuer. We find that also back in his chairs, and so I don't have to explain that, but that's what it is about. You have this very heavy piece, and at the same time, you make it almost like flying. It's the lightness of it. So I'm sure that this was very close to the original intent. That's how I see that image. And that's also why it was inspiring for us, because we see this image and we see the reality, and there is a bit of a
So why'd you go with downlight and instead of uplight? Why'd you go with light on the canopy instead of light in the trough, in the the basement level?
Yeah.
And this clearly has a source that's below the picture plane, let's call it,
yeah.
and that's shining up.
Yeah.
And, there's probably a floodlight hiding behind the knee wall there that's doing the under
Yes.
canopy.
Yeah.
So your proposal, irrespective of one's thoughts about the bronze, it's very much relying on downlights that bounce off of the flooring surface and then reflect up to this new metallic material that you're hoping to kind of highlight.
Yes.
Why go that way as opposed to uplight? Or try, this is clearly much brighter in terms of the effect
Yeah,
than
yeah.
you would ever achieve.
Yeah. But this is the romantic, poetic version of the idea. But I'm sure, as you're saying, there are serious uplights placed there to make that photo possible. We have to create a building which is functional. If you go close by, if you cross the bridge, go under the canopy, it needs to be also the right atmosphere. And I'm pretty sure if you would walk into that image, it's not so great.
Not fun.
It's not so great. It's overlighted. That's what I was saying with maybe the solution in working purely with lights is even more polluting than try to have less light and play on reflectivity. I'm also hoping that some of the light from inside is getting reflected partly on that metal surface. Maybe even some light from outside is getting reflected, and that all helps. It's a conceptual idea. You can speak against it and you can give it a try, and it will need work. It needs fine tuning. We have to test this. Maybe it's more complicated than we think, but I somehow like it to try to get close to this kind of welcoming, awning, I would say, modernistic version of an awning, a marquee, but at the same time not overlight it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jefferson, did you have a question? Okay, all right, Commissioner Chu.
Inverted ziggurat. Done in order to bring the light up this way, which celebrates, it sort of lifts what seems to be heavy building, gives it lightness, picking it up. And that, even those cancels, setbacks to me were always the intent of light, so that they kind of give a reflection and the canopy just being a part of that integral plane of relationship. Yeah, I commenting on it?
No, we're just questioning.
So to that, I also would say that if there was a way to light it, light it down. So I feel like it does.
And at the same time, I appreciate your comment. At the same time, I must say, if you look at the original lighting concept of the building, then you have three steps in the ziggurat. There's only lighting on the first one, downlights into the sculpture garden. On the second and the third step is no lighting. And in general, there is no uplighting. So again, we all have this kind of image in our heads, but the reality is almost the opposite.
I think
Yeah, Commissioner Jefferson.
the upside down ziggurat, if you wanted the lighting to come down slowly, you would follow that form and it would be excessive, right? Can you imagine light just coming down, lighting the surfaces as they go down? That's an approach. This on the right-hand side, it's just very heavy and harsh. It's a very harsh looking.
Unlike the building itself.
No, that's the good point, because this new proposal is subtle. The building is harsh, heavy building, and this is a subtle approach. That's really beautiful. The path coming in, the way it reflects the light is just subtle and beautiful.
Okay. Any other final?
I'd also like to say that, I think for us, it's not just about the lighting itself, it's about the spirit of being, welcoming and, not just the way it's lit.
And maybe in general, we should not forget, and we all know that the lighting concept in general and the daylight concept in general has always been a big challenge in this building. As much as we love it, we also have to admit that. So it's fair enough to say that maybe the lighting was not fully there or can be slightly improved.
Okay. All right. Any other final questions? All right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we're going to review these three very discrete proposals for the exterior of the building. One is, and I do want to just step back a little bit and thank you for the care and thought that you've put into this as we've been talking about the designation process and then the application process for these changes. It's been really wonderful to work with you and to really think, and I know the staff is the one who's really talking to you, but thinking through how to approach the building. And I think your approach has been so incredibly sensitive. And I think that this is just a perfect partnership for this building. So I'm so grateful for that. Thank you. And I do want to note that there are spaces outside of our purview that are going to be restored to public use, which are now privately used. And this elevator will facilitate that. And I think that will be a real plus for the public's experience in this building. So we have the three components. We have the elevator bulkhead, which is visible from the east in the context of the existing stair bulkhead and treated in the similar way. Very carefully in terms of even the direction of the board form. And then we have the backlit signage under the poster case and then the underside of the canopy, which we've been discussing mostly in our hearing. So we'll have a discussion on each of these three components. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to?
Thank you.
this?
So I've loved this building since a kid, and I want to restate what the chair said about we greatly appreciate your thought. And let me get through the two simple parts. The elevator bulkhead is fine. The signage is fine. Someone else may have a comment, but I think they're fine. I zoomed in on this Stoller picture, and it looks to me like there is a lighting source on top of the canopy. And then there are clearly sources from, I'll call it the pit or whatever, but the lower story space behind the walls. And maybe you can't, but I do not think the brass plate is a good solution. I could be proved wrong. And what I'd suggest is possibly some cleaning of the concrete and doing some mock-ups of lighting. I realize you're probably right that behind the wall where you can't see it, but if I tried to walk in, I'd walk right into it. There's a light fixture lighting the underside of the canopy. But with modern LED lights, you can get really small sources to potentially light that. And then there could also be some sources on the top of the canopy or sources inside the wall of the cellar space shooting up that would get something maybe not as dramatic, because having done photography, particularly with black and white, it can be more sensitive than our eye can be. So it will make it look more dramatic than it actually would be. But I think you can get something that balances the need for light, this look that we have, something that sort of indicates the design intent, even though it wasn't really done. And I'd like to see that instead of the brass plate. The other two parts are totally approvable as is.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, the freight elevator is needed and well positioned, and if another museum should eventually utilize the space, that would be very helpful to them as well. So I think that's great. The vitrine signage and the general lighting, I think is totally appropriate. I also, think that the bronze panel is calling too much attention to itself and kind of alters our sense of what the original design was. And I think that if you could work with the staff on devising some methods of uplighting. I would think uplighting is the appropriate thing. Looking at, this is a picture from Architecture Daily of a, it's a recent picture, in effect, not an old picture. And look at the drama of the building. And then if you just had, and there's some light, going into the bridge, but not as much as you might need. So, but I think if you had some lighting in there, the whole building it's leading you upward, and I think that's the intent of the architecture as well. So, and the advantage is it could be some kind of temporary lighting. I mean, it doesn't have to be, necessarily something damaging to any of the structure, I think, because you do have that well there. And also, you can just use something that's relatively, removable in the future, that's not permanent. But I think there's a way to really create a nice wash of light in that space, which obviously I think is desirable and could go with the existing lighting, the building lighting. So that's what I would recommend, just that we approve everything and say, work with the staff on some additional lighting for the bridge area.
Commissioner Lutfi?
If the staff is willing to go for it.
So I agree that the bulkhead works in terms of its visibility and the materiality, and ultimately it will make the space more accessible and useful. I do want to say something so the lighting is the issue on the outside, and I do want to say something about this particular designer and some of the lighting work that I've seen that they've done, especially in the Park Avenue Armory, and a very complicated space. I'm talking about your interior work, of course. And every time, I'm not joking, I go into this building, I pay attention to the lighting and what your solutions were, from the amount of light, the fixtures you used, everything, the impact it has on the spaces. And I have to say, I mean, you kind of demonstrated it when you were speaking. Your solutions was very thoughtful and successful and wonderful. So ultimately, I'm feeling very confident that, there is going to be a wonderful solution here. But this might not be it. I think all your thinking around it is very interesting, and you're raising a lot of important issues, but there is something about that mass of metal, and maybe it isn't so shiny, that seems almost jarring in contrast to the materiality around it. Now, I do appreciate also the fact that you pointed out these accents, how the bronze is used in an accent, and you're using it effectively for the vitrine, but it might not be here. I do agree that it would be a good idea to clean the bottom just to see what you're working with, and do a little more thinking around it. I have to say, I think you're going to have to think about what the impact is going to be at the lower level also, because of the restaurant. And I have spent a lot of time coming here at night, because when Flora Bar was down there, I couldn't stay away. So that is going to influence your thinking as well. But I never, ever felt, well, as I entered the building, that it was sort of heavy and pitch black, because I felt like there was light emanating from the inside, so that, I don't know, maybe what you're talking about are accents, but I'm not the expert, and I look forward to some, additional thinking on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I'm going to echo my fellow commissioners. I think that the care and attention you put in the proposal for the elevator bulkhead was really appreciated. It feels like it belongs. I mean, everything you did was out of respect to the existing building and its design. And that's the only reason why I also agree about this piece here is that when I see the image on the right, I wish I could see the board form back. If I were to see it on in reality, I'd be like, oh, I missed the board form. And it probably is because Rory was so restrained in this palette, so minimal, so sculptural. It's just about sculpture. This building is a sculpture, and the light is what brings it to life. And I think it's great that you're studying it because I actually think it'd be amazing if you did a holistic lighting design for the exterior, which we review all the time for the historic buildings here. Is how's it being celebrated at night? Where are you putting every fixture to look at the ornament, the archways? And this is a piece that needs to be studied very carefully and uniquely, as opposed to standard lighting approaches that are done in most classical buildings. I think there's a huge opportunity. You guys are definitely skilled enough to do this. And yeah, I think ultimately everything looks great. I don't like the plate. And I do think the texture is actually what's important. Those party walls that he designed are so spectacular. The board form party wall plane and the way it integrates with the stone is perfect. Every single step in locking in. This to me is just another piece of that whole composition. But I'm sure that you guys will do an amazing job. Wonderful project.
Commissioner Master.
Yeah, so I think the elevator bulkhead is fine. I think the lettering, what you're doing with the vitrine is fine. So when you first presented this with the brass, I thought, wow, that's very creative. And what an interesting solution to making it warm and lighting it up. I think, so I want to applaud that you tried to come up with a different solution to lighting this area and tried to incorporate some of the material that was used in this building. But I think as we've seen from a lot of the comments from the community, it might be too much of an intervention, and that I think it changes some of the experience as you enter the building. So I applaud the creativity, but I think that we may have to go with alternate lighting on this.
Commissioner Jefferson.
So, this element is separated from the building. It's not connected to the building. It's a separate element. It does more than just lighting. It's an entry. It's an invitation. It's a contrast, and it's a branding of this new facility. And the subtlety of putting a thin brass layer at the bottom of this. I mean, just look at the picture. It's just gorgeous, and it works really well. And it calls attention to itself, but in a nice way. This is an entry this is a separate element standing there that you penetrate to get into this building. And that's the way I view it.
Commissioner Goldblum.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I agree with what everyone was saying. It doesn't sound like the bronze plate's going that far, but I would I think Mark kind of got me thinking on the idea, which I totally agree with. I think the next time you come back, if there is to be a next time, do a mock-up. Take some pictures at night. I think that's, we don't regulate the lighting levels. We don't regulate the effect of the light, but we do regulate the placement of the fixtures. So it's kind of, one without the other. But I think clearly the comments have been focused on the effect of the lighting as opposed to the fixtures themselves. But looking at the entry very closely, and I really appreciate the applicant's approach here. I don't think that the idea is necessarily to replicate the Esto photo or to blast the building into the stratosphere with light. Not to mention the evils of dark, the dark sky that will be implied with that. But I think that there's a possibility to create the subtle, soft effect that the applicant's shooting for without this kind of double bounce that they're proposing to do, where they have like, a sconce here, a fixture there. Luckily about this entry, there's lots of places to put lighting that would not be obtrusive. I mean, if you look at this, the image on the right, there are those two little walls that are actually planters. There's planters, behind, on top of those walls. Put stuff there. There's like, the granite tucks in front of the concrete a little bit. You could hide behind that. The planter at the lower level is like 3 times as wide as it was when it was originally built. It goes far back. There's lots of places to hide stuff. You could also do. There's actually an outlet, a recessed outlet on the left behind the wall on the left. You could put a downlight there that would bounce off the floor. You could add something new that was a footlight instead of having it to be an uplight that would do the same bounce. I mean, the surface of the bridge itself, you could propose, I don't know if that's an original material or it probably isn't, I would guess. Looks like it's just concrete scored. You could play around with the reflectivity of that material. That would make it a little more reflective, or the finish of it. I mean, I think there's lots of things you can do that would be subtle, that would give you the soft effect. And I'm sure, it's inappropriate of me to be throwing ideas at Herzog and Demore on, for goodness sakes. But so forgive me. But I think that there's lots of, you have the garbage pails, you have the sign. There's so many places to hide stuff that you could, that would be subtle and that could give you the lighting levels that you want, that would meet code, but that would keep it consistent. Although I do think that the idea of trying to somehow find a way to uplight the building in a more permanent way would be very dramatic and would give you the kind of statement that Sotheby's is looking for, in a way that was consistent with the historical imagery and with the perceived intent of the architect. And I think it would be a really interesting idea. But I think doing a mock-up as a part of this next go-round would be very useful. And I mean, Everardo likes the bronze. I don't hate it, but I think that a mock-up of that too would have been a really good idea, would have probably addressed what people, I think, are experiencing as a very aggressive intervention.
Thank you so much. So I think there's a lot of support for, unanimous support for 2 of the components of this application. And the third piece, I think there's a lot of support for the approach, or what your goals, I should say. And but I think most people think that it needs more study. So what I suggest we do today is take a vote to approve in part the application and approve the 2 components that we can move forward with, the elevator bulkhead and the signage. And we'll ask you to continue to study, and our staff will be available to help you as you continue to study the treatment for the entry and how you address the lighting and the feeling of the space. And as Commissioner Goldblum mentioned, we don't regulate wattage or intensity. It's really the fixtures. So there may be some solution that is ultimately approved at staff level and doesn't need to come back to the commission, but we'll leave it open for now, so that should you want to come back with something else, or even a mock-up of this and a mock-up of lighting as a comparison, you'll be welcome to come back to a public meeting for that. Okay, so we'll vote to approve the 2 components.
With regards to LPC 25-06122, 945 Madison Avenue, Upper East Side Historic District, a modern style museum building designed by Marcel Breuer and Associates and built in 1964-1966. Application is to construct a rooftop bulkhead and install signage and lighting. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. With regards to the bulkhead and signage and lighting, I recommend approval, finding that the proposed rooftop bulkhead will provide an additional height elevator to support the continued use of the building for art-related purposes. that the bulkhead will only be minimally visible over the north primary facade and will only be visible over the east secondary facade in the context of other existing rooftop accretions, that the bulkhead is simple in form and will be clad with board-formed concrete texture and aligned with the cladding pattern on the lower portions of the secondary facade, thereby harmonizing with the building's existing form and finishes, that the proposed light fixtures at the entrance canopy, areaway, and signage vitrine will provide directed light that will accentuate the existing features and signage in a balanced manner with minimal impact to the historic fabric, that the halo-lit bronze lettering at the signage vitrine will utilize minimal attachment points and will be small in scale and will not overwhelm the original features or detract from the building. And the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building and the historic district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote? Aye.
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 Commissioner?
Aye.
All right, so we've approved the two components and we'll continue to work with you on the entry treatment. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll move to our next and final item.
All right, the last item of the day is public hearing item number 9, LPC 25-03390, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1389, Lot 7501, 21 East 74th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. This is a neo-Italian Renaissance-style apartment building designed by Schwartz and Gross, built in 1924 to 25, and the application is to replace the solarium.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrew Caracciolo, Consulting Architect for the project, 21 East 74th Street. And we're speaking about the addition of or replacement of a solarium on the 14th floor. Here is on the left-hand side an historic 1940 tax photo showing showing the penthouse. Excuse me, the solarium on the 14th floor above the bank building, now an Apple store. So it's straight above it. And is there a pointer or?
There should be a pointer up there. It's a long, thin one.
I'll reach over the point. So we're speaking about that existing point in the 1940 tax map. So, oh, thank you. Going next, next slide shows the 1911 Sanborn map showing row houses on this site as well as the Apple Store. Oh, thank you. And that's, oh, perfect. All right, so on the left-hand side, you'll see another tax photo showing what's the front facade of our building. And then on the right-hand side, here is renovation plan approving a solarium, replacing that awning in, I think this is 1987, 97, excuse me. Next slide. From directly across Madison Avenue, straight across, you'll see the existing solarium on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is where the photo's taken from with the sightline photo. Moving forward from there, this is the southeast corner of Madison Avenue and East 74th Street, showing the solarium, existing solarium right there, and the direction where the photo's taken from. moving along on the left-hand side, you'll see the existing solarium, and then on the right-hand, the proposed solarium, with the top photo being the facade that faces Madison Avenue, and the bottom photos, the facade that face the inner court. This is left-hand side existing floor plan section and another elevation. As on the right-hand side, the same thing, which they share the same footprint, existing and proposed. Here you'll see on the left-hand side, the existing apartment plans, on the right-hand side, the proposed. In the middle, top, the existing photograph, and the middle bottom is the proposal. And that's naturally a photo montage. Michael's going to speak now.
I'm Michael Lish, the project architect for the renovation and solarium. Just going to chime in to explain the color matching that we did for the new solarium cladding to mirror the paint color of the existing window frames of the rest of the building. We selected RAL 8019, and the manufacturer from Switzerland, Panorama, has a color which is very close to that, which is titled PH3. This is a dark brown. Even though on the screen it does look quite black, it's quite a bit lighter than it's appearing here. And our intention is really to blend in with the existing window frames and the rest of the buildings, to not call more attention to the solarium than is needed. And the construction of the solarium is aluminum structure and frame and cladding on the exterior, and wood cladding on the interior. Interior, we're cladding with wood, which is the prompt from the client, their desire, and we will be cladding the exterior, as we said on the previous slide, with the aluminum powder coated finish.
Okay, so here again is straight across Madison Avenue on the left-hand side, what you really see as a person's on the sidewalk, and the right-hand side, the proposed. So you'll see that we are, this is again the southeast corner, we are squaring off the building a bit, excuse me, the solarium a bit, not the building, and the Apple Store right below. Moving forward again, this is an example project at the Carlisle. Again, that has on the top middle, you'll see a recently approved by the commission solarium with a squarish look from the street. And then similarly on the Upper West Side, another project with the existing solarium below and the proposed or approved solarium on the bottom. Again, one more in, I think, the Greenwich Village, I'm not sure, Extension District, but another solarium replacement as well. Again, a little more of a geometric profile than the current. Anyway, that leaves us with our final slide. And any questions?
Great, thank you so much. Commissioners, do we have any questions on this one?
Yeah, so there's a fence that's pretty tall right in front of the solarium, right?
Yeah, it's I mean, somewhat of a parapet fence. It's existing and proposed.
So it's to remain, and then
Yeah,
you're
it's to
rebuilding
remain, and otherwise,
behind it?
yeah, it's to remain.
And it's required by code?
Yes,
Yeah.
because otherwise we get stuck in a situation. There's doors there, and then we have.
Oh, you have sliding?
Yeah.
Oh, right
sliding
behind
doors,
it, okay.
existing and
That's
proposed.
why.
And then otherwise you have, parapet height.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, this is, often a problem with renderings, but your new version, although it's squared off, seems to be more prominent than the old solarium. And maybe it's just, the way the rendering looks and your intent is to try to make it disappear as much as possible, correct?
That's our intent, and I think
Yeah,
the square
okay,
shape
okay.
achieves that. We're not changing the height. Yeah, on the walking vines.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, we're going to move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who would like to speak on this item? Please come up. Zainab Turan.
Commissioners, Zainab Turan here, speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends does not object to the canopy replacement. Having said that, we understand the proposed solarium parapet will be significantly thicker than the existing one and appear more permanent than a solarium. We respectfully request the client reconsider the thickness to sustain the visual harmony of the building's side facade that is visible from Madison Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. There are no attendees with their hands raised. If you'd like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now. Okay, there's still no hands raised, so I will move on and note that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval. And with that, I'll bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. So would you like to respond to the comment we heard from the Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts? They commented that it seemed heavier and more permanent. Just come up to the mic.
Yeah, and I think it's fairly insignificant, the change, and that the squarish edge seems to match what's done just right up the street at the Carlisle. And I feel like that greenhouse, just, sort of, the existing greenhouse shape is a little more applied than this shape, which I think, blends in a little better with the building.
Yeah, the rigid lines are more architectural. Okay. Any other final questions? All right, let's Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Ginsburg?
Second.
Second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So this is to replace an existing greenhouse with a new metal and glass enclosure. This is already interior space, and the commission has many times allowed the replacement of earlier greenhouses on setback terraces with new enclosures. Many of them, as the applicant showed, went from a sloped or angled profile to a more rectilinear profile with a cornice. So that is something we've seen before and have approved it. This is visible over the back facade. And with that, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you start this one? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think,
On the record?
oh, well. Let me retract that. Please. So, using this one. So this solarium is, I'm okay with it. It's very simply designed, as you said, and has been pointed out by the applicant. We have approved other solariums like this in the neighborhood. It's basically using exactly the same footprint. The only difference is at the top. So I can approve this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it's on the 14th floor. I think it's the same footprint. I think it's appropriate.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Great.
Sure. In the matter of docket 25-03390, 21 East 74th Street, the Upper East Side Historic District, a neo-Italian Renaissance style apartment building designed by Schwartz and Gross and built in 1924 to 1925. The application is to replace a solarium. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. I recommend approval finding.
that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the work will only be seen from public thoroughfares at a distance against the background of the building's large secondary facades, that the proposed solarium will replace an existing modern solarium of similar size and will be well scaled to the terrace, that the proposed solarium will be simple in design and consistent with modern solariums found throughout the historic district in terms of form, materials, finishes, and predominance of glazing, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or historic district.
Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
Clerk, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chafin, Commissioner Chafin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg. Aye. Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson. Oh, he's gone. Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passed.
That's approved. Thank you very much.
You.
Yes. All right. So that concludes our public hearing today, January 28th, and we will be meeting next Tuesday, February 4th.